This is Steve Gussman. Welcome to the PhiloSci podcast. I've been wanting to start a podcast for years. Actually, did do one way back in the day as a kid. Video game one in high school. This is more run-of-the-mill general podcast, the kind that Joe Rogan popularized and really probably began, where I'll just get friends, interview people, talk about anything. Calling it PhiloSci because my favorite subject is philosophy of science, the philosophical underpinnings of science. But we're going to talk about all sorts of things on here. We did our first podcast last night. It was very long and meandering, so I'm going to keep this short. I interviewed my close friend Ty Catello, a law student right now, and we talk about history, politics, and the sort of center of our conversation is that I made him watch Hamilton with me, which I love, on Disney+. We didn't get to everything I wanted to talk to, but it's so long and we went off in some random directions. So in the future, I'm going to try and keep them shorter, maybe even have some notes of things I want to hit, but it was a lot of fun. So glad to have finally started. Here is PhiloSci episode 1. Okay, we're recording. All right, I don't have a name for this podcast yet. I'm going to have some intro I record. I'll put it in there so they'll know my name. But I am Steve Gussman. I have Ty Catello.
How's it going, guys?
Should we introduce ourselves? Should we say who we are, what we do?
Yeah, why not?
Let's let you go first. You're the guest.
Me, just Ty Catello. I'm a law student. Just here so I don't get fined. I won't get that reference. But yeah, I'm a law student, and I majored in philosophy and history in undergrad. And,
very good. Steve Gussman, video game developer, study philosophy of science, physics, computer science, evolutionary theory, science generally. Wanted to start this podcast for a while. Hard to get a hold of Ty, but we got him here. We're going to talk about Hamilton, but we don't have to only talk about Hamilton. So just go, wherever you want to go with it. But
yeah, I have a lot of thoughts because we just watched it. And just to start us off, we were talking about earlier about time. But I always think about Hamilton's big because this is what the modern populace will remember about the revolution. It's kind of like a reimagining of the revolution. And watching it, I was kind of looking to see what they took out of it. One of the things is, George Washington, had to say goodbye. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting because they've been coming at George Washington. All those Virginia farmers for, the slavery thing.
The woke types.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say, just off the bat, what really aggravated me was Jefferson. They made him a pompous, asshole.
Yeah.
He was a quiet guy. A very, a very quiet guy.
Right.
He actually... This is a man who, when he was president, his State of the Union would be read by someone else. He would write it in a letter, and then they would just read it out.
Interesting.
So, and I go back, because I don't know if they did that because they're trying to highlight Hamilton's point of view.
They're rivals, so his point of view is...
But they're also, once again, they're coming at Jefferson as well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I did think, this is my second time seeing it. I saw it on the 4th of July, actually, for the first time. And I didn't think it was as bad this time. So there's a little bit of that too, which is that you and I are Jefferson fans. So then when you watch this thing and you're like, Hamilton's the hero and Jefferson's just kind of this character, you're like, what the fuck? It's also because it's about Hamilton, they're crediting Hamilton with a lot.
Well, that one thing I couldn't. This one, they slipped in there very quick at the end, and I was really? They're she implies that Hamilton died so early, and he could have done something about slavery.
Yeah.
I was wow, you guys are.
And they have Hamilton. Well, so we should say up front, the woke viewpoint is not represented here because you and I happen to be two people against postmodern woke sort of capital S social justice ideology. I come at that from a scientific background. You come at it from a historical, philosophical background and law. Right. I mean, they come at for everything. So if you believe in anything classical or traditional, that there's anything good worth preserving. But as a result of this it's not, I wouldn't call this like a woke piece, because overall it's actually pretty good at understanding like the classical point of the revolution, like most of the lyrics and stuff. But they do emphasize things in weird ways of like, immigrants, we got the job done, and like a lot of talk about immigrants when they probably, you would know better than me. I wouldn't think that it would be thought of. It's like injecting modern politics into something.
Yeah, big time. Because like one of the biggest problems is like during the revolution is a lot of people weren't born in America. There was a lot of generals who wanted Washington's position, but they were born in Britain.
Yeah.
So like it's like they would be. I mean, the idea of
the modern
immigrants
conception of immigrant versus.
You don't have Irish immigrants until like. Obviously the potato famine, but that's after the revolution, clearly. That's like before the Civil War, 1800s. But
well, the other part of that is they're injecting this. This obviously was a controversy, but they're emphasizing the abolition thing also in a weirdly modern way, where it was a controversy at the time, and Thomas Jefferson famously wrote against it despite his actions having slaves. He's famously part of the abolitionist in philosophical lineage. He is part of that fight. And so to have Hamilton be like, well, you're a slaver, and to have, I don't know, they acted like Jefferson had no abolitionism in him, which is not.
Yeah, actually, so I went to, where was I? Not the Metropolitan. I think it's the Public Library of New York. They had a Hamilton thing. And they had the phrase, I can't remember, I think it was like patriot, writer, scoundrel. I remember the last
That's
word
awesome.
specifically because this is actually really pissing me off. Well, whatever. But Hamilton actually hates immigrants. That's why they called him scoundrel. There are writings towards the end of his life that he was like, we shouldn't be allowing people in.
Wow.
So one of the reasons that I like Jefferson over Hamilton, and this is why like this whole thing, I was like, dude, because after the war he becomes very like, authoritarian's a stretch, but like he wanted a monarchy kind of. I kind of have sympathies for Hamilton because like he went through the war. You saw like Washington, and like in the play it shows that like they lack resources and stuff, and you see like democracy like can't come up with a decision. So after that he kind of like saw democracy as inefficient. So but my point is like, I don't know, they made him seem like he was like this Republican figure, and you know, I don't know, you can go back and forth with it.
I've watched some stuff outside of the play itself of like interviews with Lin-Manuel Miranda and stuff, and it's interesting what makes it and doesn't that he understood, which is that like when he talks about Hamilton, they do put this in there in more indirect ways, but when he talks about Hamilton, he's like, yeah, this guy would just kind of like shoot at the mouth like ideas like, and he mentions maybe a monarchy like in one of these interviews, and he just kind of thought like the way they approach that in the show is just to say, oh, Hamilton just kind of talks too much and doesn't play his cards close to his chest enough and think long enough before he shoots. But they don't go into the specifics of what that meant, which is that he wasn't always. Again, it kind of goes back to being like, on the one hand, I like it because this is a and I want to know what you think about the play overall, because I like it a lot more than I even thought I would, and I have some issues with it. But generally speaking, it is a classical work in the sense that like it actually celebrates the right things. Like you could have gone and watched it and been like, oh wow, they don't even understand the spirit of 1776. But they actually get a lot of it in there, in the writing of the lyrics. The sort of libertarian core that is totally missing from modern progressivism. That's kind of associated with the fandom of it and whatnot.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings because like, I mean, for example. Like, obviously, it's weird. Jefferson flaunts the Declaration of Independence. I didn't like this, but the women actually go like, they're waiting for the sequel of All Men Are Created Equal. Yeah. It's like, dude, they're talking about mankind.
That's not what
like,
they meant
when
they
said
included. Right.
And here's the problem, is there are people watching this who haven't read anything, and they're like, oh, so it doesn't include women. And now you've taken our charter and basically thrown it out the window.
And yet women couldn't vote yet at the time the play takes place.
Well, historically, this is how I like to think that like there's ideals.
I agree.
Post-revolution, black people and women in certain states were allowed to vote. It's really ironic. 10 years later, that's revoked. It's very strange. It's like revolution ends, we're infatuated with this idea of like the egalitarian republic, but then like when the shit ends and, you know, it's back to business, that's taken away.
And so in some sense, America has always had these tumultuous components of, because sometimes we get a little alarmist, and maybe you and I are guilty sometimes of like, they're changing, you know.
Yeah, I just think that do not take that core out. Do not. It's not 1619 as we discussed. It is 1776.
Right. So you're referring to the 1619 project. The New York Times tries to put out this group of essays that says that the founding of the country is not 1776 with the libertarian ideals. It's 1619 with slavery, even though there's nothing unique about slavery in 1619 America. Nothing uniquely bad, I should say. There's some uniqueness, but and it's false. And they famously a bunch of I think they were Pulitzer historians write against her and say this thing is nonsense. It's an ahistorical pseudo history. She wins the Pulitzer.
Right.
We all know this is bullshit. So this again goes back to the woke stuff. And I wanna, you wanna be careful about, because on the one hand, I'm with you that that's not the context I want them to make that criticism in. Because again, because you're taking the promissory note view,
right?
And yet I think it's okay for them to point out that
this is how I view it. Slavery 1776. This is how I view it. We're gonna look at the atomic bomb in World War II. This is what I deal with all the time. People are like, we shouldn't drop the bomb. This is what I say. Do you want a North communist Japan and a South capitalistic Japan as well? Because that's the thing is,
a lot of these people would like a North communist America and a South communist.
Yeah, I don't doubt it for a second. But you don't drop the atom bomb, it leads host to all these other issues. So slavery. If you come out to the table of 1776, you don't have the 3/5 compromise. It's very simple. This is not a federal government. We're just a conglomerate of states. They probably even want to be a North and South. They probably would have just done their own thing. I mean, Rhode Island, I believe, it is Rhode Island, was the last to join the Union because they were concerned about. Yeah. I think they did business, but I think something with slavery too, with the slave trade. My point is though, is that it's it's almost you're cherry picking history. Yeah. You're not seeing, because the philosophy behind the revolution could lead us for the next millennia, because it includes everyone. I'm an Italian. Yeah. People go oh, it's all straight white men. It's there's no Sicilian there either. It encompasses all of us.
Yeah, well, that is interesting. I will. Speaking of Italian, I'm going to ask you to try to stop at the table because I'm afraid it's making a noise.
Oh yeah, shit.
Speaking of Italian, but like that, and that's something interesting that people don't bring up of Antonin Scalia is a big figure in conservatism. And even libertarianism, but he and people see him as the white, and I think he's made the point of I'm Italian. What are you talking about?
Right.
You and I see it that way, where we're inheriting a philosophical lineage, not a genetic lineage. But that's America.
I think, but Scalia, I love Scalia to a certain extent, but also he misses the mark. There was a lot of times I took common law this semester, and I would read, and a lot of times I would disagree with Scalia because he was obviously not coming at Scalia, but if you really took what I think is the philosophy there, it would apply to more egalitarian principles with gay marriage.
I agree too. Sometimes they're a little restrictive with
and that's why he would make arguments like that. It's nah, because I think he has separation of powers. I think he really understands that. But I think this idea of equality, he kind of.
So because I know just from listening to things like contemporary stuff like Ben Shapiro show, he will say because I like originalism. I don't even think there should be a debate. Originalism is obviously it almost shouldn't be a word. And Scalia used to say this all the time. It's what do you mean? That's what it means to have a constitution.
I'm a textualist,
and we can get into that. It's a more specific version of originalism, but. But sometimes textualism cuts against what you're saying in the sense that Ben Shapiro. So you and I generally I think you liked the decision recently that a conservative judge made, which was to include protections of trans people in the protection of sex. Mm-hmm. That argument seems to follow, right?
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro and some of the more really right, dyed-in-the-wool Republican types didn't like that. From their perspective, textualism to them is literalism. And they're they didn't say anything about trans people. They said women. So and for me and you, I think we're kind of thinking, but wasn't the point to reduce unfair treatment based on your innate sexual.
If originalism is done right, it really should actually include more than excludes. If you really the right to privacy, for example, just take abortion. That's crazy. Scalia would say you're out of your mind. Right, but the right of privacy.
In terms of Roe v. Wade.
Right.
Oh yeah. So could you explain that to people, like how Roe v. Wade works, like in terms of law?
It's very strange. It's very strange because you're talking about like substantive due process. Because after the Civil War, you have the Equal Protection Clause, and the court for some reason like didn't want the Equal Protection Clause to like give too many rights to like African Americans, so they reject that as like the basis of your rights.
And is that a racist decision, or was there like what was that?
I want to say it's
It sounds like they were motivated.
there's definitely like some race. I'm not like I can't like cite precisely because I don't know that art of history too well. But what I will say is, so they move that out of the way, and then substantive due process becomes like the norm. There's a famous case called Lochner, where you have the right. Basically, like they were trying to do what we think of as limiting the hours that you work. It was for bakers, and they come up with this idea of like the right to contract. Almost like you're free to make your own like contract, and that's like a substantive due process right, more or less. That will eventually go away, but then they're going to come up with other rights, and privacy is one of them. Okay. It's just very strange the way they do it, because what happens is you have the 10 Amendments, and you have like I think it's the 9th Amendment that says like just because we didn't list everything in the world doesn't mean there's other rights you don't have.
There are unenumerated rights,
right? Yeah. And so what happens is they kind of flirt with the idea of privacy. But then obviously they take privacy, and somehow out of the machine comes, abortion.
And not only that, but like all sorts of other things that are much more obvious privacy concerns are not too worried about.
Right. I debated because a lot of like the liberals in my class wanted the Equal Protection Clause to be the basis for abortion. And they made their own argument. They think that like women being pregnant somehow like hinders them and it's not equal treatment, whatever. I actually think privacy is the right way to go, because it becomes a balancing. Because what happens is the way it's written is like when you're first impregnated, it's like a right to privacy that the government doesn't know you're pregnated, right? Or pregnant. And then what happens is as the baby grows and it becomes more obvious that you're pregnant, then like at a certain point the government gets involved.
Oh, that's strange.
The only reason I bring that up is like so there's a scaling.
But here's the thing with that scaling. Aren't you now legally bound to make the cutoff for making abortion illegal something physically visible?
Yeah, so in Roe v. Wade, it was, I believe, the first trimester. I think Casey is the most recent case. Yeah, but then Casey came, I think it's Casey. A little blurry on the exact cases, but then it turns to the second trimester. Oh. So, like, technology has advanced, and now you have even more time. But there's
fetus advanced a little bit too in that time.
Yeah, so but the reason I bring all that up is there seems to be this debate. We read it, and as a philosopher I got upset, but like in the early republic, we're talking about like, well, what natural rights do you have that aren't written in the Constitution? And you have judges almost coming up with rights. I guess that obviously like is not good because it's very unpredictable as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And then we kind of throw that out.
What is meant by there are unenumerated rights? Is that meant that that's left up to the legislature? What do they mean when they?
Well, just for starters, like you've probably heard it before, but like they didn't even want a Bill of Rights. They thought like everyone in the Republic just knew what natural rights were. It's very weird.
So maybe they were afraid that if they enumerated them, they'd be restricted from ones they forgot?
Exactly. So they were actually scared that, like, all right, like, we're writing these down. Are we now limiting ourselves to these? Because, like, look at quartering of soldiers. Like, it's the one that's always, like, made fun of because it's never been used, right? It's like, freedom of speech is on there. And quartering of soldiers, I mean, they seem just so weird. But honestly, I regret that they didn't push more amendments out there. But then again, what are you going to do? You can't limit the government too much.
The fear for me is the opposite side of that is like unenumerated, and then everyone could just be like, yeah, that's where abortion and anything else we want goes. I'm not saying I'm against abortion. I'm just saying that like, what are like you need like shouldn't you have detailed what the process of revealing those rights is?
Yeah. So the Supreme Court,
because can't Bernie Sanders be like, yeah, one of those enumerated rights was free college in 2021.
So the way that the Supreme Court justice kind of got around this is, by the way, and I only took one semester of con law, and I will say that you're talking about 9 justices who are coming up with their own philosophies.
Yeah, and con law is constitutional law.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, but yes.
Insider baseball over here.
Yeah, but what was I going to say? But the thing is that this is really annoying us for me is like I study this. We had huge exams and like you talk about the different opinions and stuff.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that they're going to stick to that. So Kennedy, I think it's Kennedy. One of the justices talk about remember how you're talking about like, oh, is abortion one of these like unenumerated rights? He talks about tradition. And tradition leads us to the rights. So marriage, gay marriage, right? You start with what is marriage? And then like you do that tradition
this is a very common law kind of view of how in the sense that it's based on precedent.
Yeah, very strange thing going on with law right now. We're common law. But the thing is there's a lot of like restatements going on. So like battery. Like I took crim law, they would be like battery, you'll have a common law version where it's like all these judges make an opinion and you synthesize it. And then you could have a restatement. So some scholar out in Harvard like reads all of it and he'll be like, all right, restatement 1 and like list a rule. That's not binding. But if a judge, let's say in New Jersey, uses that restatement, then that becomes the law. It's this weird blend because we're becoming more statutory.
What does statutory mean?
Statutory just means like you write down like if you kill someone like it's 2 days in jail. Like I don't know, you write that down. Common law is like someone
a judge made a decision and everyone in the future cited it. Said, what should I do? Oh, what did he do?
So that's the difference. So you have a case. Let's say 100 years ago, someone hit someone with a bat, and in that case they gave shouldn't really be not punishment, take that out, but like whether they're guilty or not, right? Maybe there's certain elements that prove guilt, and you steal those, not steal, but you cite those, and it's like, all right, you need to prove like intent, did it actually hit the person, all these different elements.
And the argument is over time, it's almost like an evolutionary process.
Right, that's common law. But what the thing, you see, we talk about all the time is that people, I don't want to say are lazy, but it's gotten easier because with the restatements, you don't need a lawyer reading 7 different cases from like 50 years ago. You just read the restatement. Okay. If that makes sense. So the restatement will list the elements.
So they'll literally just pass the old judgment through.
Yeah, and they can change it too. It's it's hard to explain because basically like you have a hierarchy of courts. The lower courts have to like abide by like the higher court's previous decisions. Right. So it's like a weird
Very interesting. Oh, is that how it works? So each level's decisions are actually more important.
Yeah, so we talked about this a lot in con law. It's called stare decisis, which is basically like the decision shall stand. Yeah. The thing is, the Supreme Court doesn't have to listen to anything in the past.
Because they're at the top.
Yeah, exactly. So you could have like common law tradition going back to the early republic, theoretically, Commerce Clause, even though that has changed so much. It's gone back and forth. They could change it at any moment. Mm-hmm. That's why but the Supreme Court is still fundamental. So law, it's very wishy-washy. Mm-hmm. But what I will go back to this is one of the things that was really aggravating about law school, especially common law, is like they don't have this tradition of the 1776. And I honestly believe in order to understand 1776, you need to understand the Roman and Greeks pretty well.
Because our founders were obsessed
here's a great, I don't know if I told you this about Jefferson and Hamilton. So Jefferson has a dinner, and they all come. And he has pictures of the 3 greatest men. Newton's on there. I think a musician's on there.
Well, real quick, and I hope I don't make you forget what you're saying. You just remind me, this is something I liked in Hamilton. It's just a small detail, but they did have a couple of times where the lyric for Jefferson was every action has an equal opposite reaction. He's talking socially. They're kind of being poetic, but that was to kind of point to the fact that he liked the physical sciences. I just thought that was kind of cool because that's one of Newton's laws.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it was just kind of a cool little.
That's the thing. Like I said, they made him so pompous. Like Jefferson truly was like an intellectual. I mean, he was very soft-spoken.
Well, didn't he say something like he would have been a scientist, but he feels he has to do this thing so that people in the future can. He has to do this political thing.
Yeah, I don't know how far his science went. I know he had Newton on there, so clearly he was.
So who are these 2 other men on the wall?
I can't remember. I just remember it was Newton. I think some musician. But it's not that important because there's the 3. Hamilton comments on them. And then he asked Hamilton, who do you think is the greatest person in all of history? Oh. And then Hamilton said, Julius Caesar. And then Jefferson gets so pissed because obviously Julius Caesar destroys the Roman Republic. And they just founded a republic. And so in Jefferson's letters, he'll continuously say oh, I remember that day that Hamilton cited Julius Caesar and uses it to push that he's not really into Republican ideals.
That's interesting.
But yeah, I don't know. Also, so Jefferson will become a professor at a university.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a Virginia university. And like the students got all rowdy. I think like they shot guns in the air. Like something with horses. It's just rowdiness. It was really bad.
Yeah.
And they collect him in, and he stands up to like yell at the students basically. And like he's like about to tear up, this old man, like shaking. So he like sits back down. So someone else has to yell at them.
Oh wow.
He that's why like he's just such a soft-spoken guy.
Yeah.
Also, when they were doing the Declaration of Independence, this is probably one of my favorite stories I ever heard. They're going over it and like they're taking this out, they're taking that out, and Jefferson's in the corner of Independence Hall like wincing at like every word they take out. So Benjamin Franklin comes over and he tells a story. He like sits down and he's like, I'm starting a hat shop. I forget the exact shop, but the premise will still remain the same, but it's like the best top hats, right? And he's like, and then he goes to his friend, and his friend takes out the. So it's best top hats. Then he goes to his other friend. It's like, you don't want to be the best, just top hats, right? Then he goes to another friend, and he says, you know what, just make it hats, take out top. So in the end, it basically implies that like when you do like public writing, it gets like mushed.
That's funny because I'm reading it's like a Barnes and Noble. I'm looking over it. We're doing this in my sort of I guess foyer, and Jake's got his bookshelf out here. Me and him have the Constitution of the United States and selected writings from the founding fathers. Barnes and Noble did a little collection of things, and reading Ben Franklin in there, he is funny. He's snarky. He writes like polemics.
Benjamin Franklin's like the best. Like he really is. Oh man, because when you read, because one of the things I hate is like obviously pretentiousness, and this is an era of gentry. It's really weird. Me and Nabil have talked about this, where it's like history wise, when you get a very noble high class that no one can really get in, you get very sophisticated people. Like think of classical music and stuff. People that all have like the same deep education. And that's why, like, this revolution...
Or shallow education, as we seem to be.
Yeah, but I think that's a modern world because, no technology, it's like a whole host of things. But like, my point is that, so when they all came to the table, they all have, like, the same history, right? It's like Roman, Greek, do you know Latin, this or that? Yeah. So you can kind of, like, play ping pong with
and this
more
lasted
complex
a long
ideas.
time.
Yeah, it did. It starts to fade out, like...
I'm sure it was a gradation, but, like, classical education, including things like Greek and Roman, goes pretty far, right? Like centuries.
Oh, that was it. Like you went to college, you just studied Greek and Roman literature.
Around when does this start to stop? I mean, it's pretty modern times, right? Because at least in Ivy League.
I remember I was listening to when I was living at Amazon Packages. It was a medieval class, and we were talking about like the Dark Age of Rome, right? And he always does. The guy came in, he's like, listen, you never know when you're in the Dark Age, and he made a joke. He said some might say the Dark Age of like the university started when they stopped requiring people to know Greek and Latin,
right?
Which I thought was interesting, but. Yeah, it goes back since the beginning of these universities. I mean, there's a reason that all these models are in Latin, but...
Yeah, well...
I also, because when you look up big words, right, they're all Latin, Greek, like, and the thing is that I think people are losing big words because if you knew Latin, I knew Latin, I say like a big Latin word, you would just get it. Like, yes. Yeah. But if you don't, you kind of learn it in a different way.
Yeah, here's something interesting, and it's somewhat coincidental, but like the sciences are a bastion of genuine academia, and the scientific names for many things are Latin, some are Greek, geometry, earth measure, but then like species names, like earlier I said Vespula malsulifrans. I mean, that's how you pronounce it, but that's the eastern yellow jacket that I was showing you that infected my house. So that's interesting, too, that it survives in a small way there.
Yeah, when I was taking Latin, there was a lot of, like, medical students who were taking it.
Right. And Katie, actually, my sister is a medical doctor. She, I think she minored in, I don't know if they called it classics or if she minored directly in Latin, but yeah, when she was...
No, yeah, she did. That's actually how we bonded. I just remember that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, a few years ago, around when I met you, we were at my sister's house. Dude, and that's why I wanted to have this podcast. That was like a salon that day. It was like New Year's 2018? 18. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Probably 2019. And it was just a few people at my sister's old place, and you guys broke out into a debate about history and politics, and everyone's chiming in. It's getting a little rowdy. People are drinking a little. It was just like, I was like, this is what, because, we're nerds, and I don't even drink. So, like, I go to parties and stuff. I'll end up in arguments with people if I can find someone to have one. And but you're kind of a weirdo. And people are like, what the hell is he doing over there? But this was like a party about that. It was really cool.
No, it was fun.
I don't know if you want to talk about your plan here or if you want to hold that off with the letters and everything.
Oh yeah, well, me and you are planning to start, because we'll start with the concilium, which is an idea that I just find so. It's, how do I explain it? So, we're from Jersey, the mob, right?
Well, this is going somewhere I didn't
get ready
expect.
for this, right?
I get Italian on my podcast, and here we go.
For the American viewers, and I assume most of you have seen The Godfather. If not, you better. But, you know, the beginning of the scene, you know, you have people coming to The Godfather for help, right? And it's this idea of like a patron-client. Rome was organized in that hierarchy, like completely. So the way
Side note, I have not seen The Godfather. Continue.
Wait, what? You've never seen it? So you just don't like cinematography.
Yeah, I told him I didn't watch Jurassic Park earlier.
Oh, that's right. But the way it works is like, so I'm not going to pretend, I don't want to like imply that in America, like certain institutions are above others. But I worked as a plumber. So like we'll do plumber, we'll do lawyer, and we'll do like statesman, right?
Okay.
So
what the hell is a statesman? Is that just like a political?
Just politician.
Okay.
Yeah. Back in the ancient world, like you would have like bureaucracies, like taxes and stuff. You would have a forum. You want to know if this was a part of the Roman Empire, you'd have a forum. So the forum was where you would have like markets and like just general administration. Like you'd send your daughter Julie, like go to the forum and like deal with this or whatever. Anyway, plumber has.
I feel like I know that from like Neopets. They had weird stuff like weird references like that.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. But the way it works is like a plumber has an issue, he goes to his patron. So that would be like the lawyer. And then so it's like a weird hierarchy where it's like you have a patron and then like you might so you have a patron who's like above you. Yeah. So if you have an issue, you go to your patron. But like you might have like you might have 5
He's
clients
kind of your sugar daddy.
Yeah, that's so
here's what's interesting. I don't know if you've heard of Patreon on the website.
Yeah.
I love that that's their idea, is like the modern day like patronage, but it's almost reversed. It's like the people in small increments patronize some creator rather than having some big benefactor. But that's why it's called Patreon, and that's why your fans are called patrons, is that they're like, you're sort of doing what you're doing, providing whatever content you're providing, and they're sort of like spritzing you with coins.
Yeah, no, that's I actually did it for Latin once because this guy was doing his own thing.
I might, if this podcast ends up mattering at all, or anything I do, maybe I'll end up with a Patreon. You were asking me about my future earlier, and I had no plans. So
Yeah,
here we go.
But the reason why was I bringing up the Patreon client? Oh, because it's the concilium. I mean, and this is like very exaggerated, but like your daughter, you know, I don't know, is pregnant now with like some guy 3 blocks down in Rome, and you want to like, you're freaking the hell out, you're about to snap. You would order a concilium. Could be of your clients, could be of your patrons, could be of your friends, and they would gather. And this is actually pretty stoic in nature. It's like, calm down, talk. It's almost like a cabinet, basically. Like you would have dinner and you would discuss, like, what do I do? You know, and it's usually a business. It's not usually such family issues. But the point is like something's happened and you need to like calm down and think through
it's
it.
Like an intervention or a moderation.
Yeah. So obviously for the letter idea that you talked about, I'm thinking of doing like a concilium of letters. The Latin escapes.
Wait a minute. Is this what council is short for?
Yeah. That's where we get the word council from. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the thing. Like certain words, like they get deeper. Right. You know, the meaning.
Right. Yeah. Well, somebody. Oh, man, I'm gonna forget. I don't want to leave too much time on time. So if I don't remember quickly, it's one of these obvious things where you know 2 words and one is obviously the root of the other, but because their colloquial use has so diverged, you never make the connection until someone points it out. And we talked about we're against the woke stuff. There's a book called The Madness of Crowds by a conservative philosopher named Douglas Murray. That's one of the books. There's now rapidly they're coming out, so hopefully I'll finish mine before it's totally like redundant. But Madness of Crowds is one of them, and at one point he says, this is it. So he says something like he's talking about somebody. You know, we like to make fun of the people's with wacky identities because they just get ever wackier. Somebody's on TV identifying as a big fat queer femme. And he sees this on TV, and he says, we're living in a society of people who want to act ridiculous without being ridiculed. And I never made the connection between ridiculous and ridicule until that sentence.
Huh.
We live in a society of people who want to act ridiculous but not be ridiculed. That it does explain a lot of some of this victimhood stuff, in the sense that, of course, there's a moderate version of it that's true, which is like, you could be way too socially conservative, and it's like you shouldn't treat someone who's just like a homosexual as a total weirdo.
Well, the thing is
but if someone is like identifying as a large ornate building, which apparently I heard, as I remember it, one of the people who got James Damore fired from Google identified as a large building. But
I think
that is to say that and then want people to just accept it and call you that, and it's like, but it is ridiculous. Like,
well, one of the things about that, like, I mean, the meme on the internet, I'm not saying I endorse it, but it's like, we got to bring back bullying. I would equate that to like socialization, right? Like, you're being socialized like as a child.
Yeah.
And one of the things is like, you go out, people are a lot more nasty to each other. It's like because it's almost like there's, even like this woke people, it's almost like they look to yell and scream at someone.
Yeah, they're not,
and they're looking for a fight.
People.
Yeah, and that's not good, because another thing is too is like,
they're not friendly.
Yeah, and another thing is, you don't want like disrespect and conflict like that. It's a very strange thing. Like, being socialized is like, you need to be able to act a certain way. You know?
Yeah.
Like, we told a story about that girl where like you said something and she, was that Jake? It was Jake. She put her hand out in front of him.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that that's just, don't ever do something like that.
Yeah. So what would happen was, the situation is, you say retard in a context that is not literal. So you say, I'm retarded because you made a mistake or something. And now the person was drunk, but she put her hand in his face. And even if you think that retard is look, I would agree that probably it's for the best that we reduced the amount that we were just throwing gay and retard around like willy-nilly. Right. And yet to like catastrophize it is obscene. And so anyway, but the point is, even if you thought that was a little uncouth to say, how is it not obviously more rude or more uncouth to put your hand in someone's face than for him to say retard? That's kind of like a deranged view.
Yeah, it's almost like they're like, this is extreme, but it's like Gestapo. Like, it's almost like you're in your classroom, right? No one really would have the balls to say like something. Like, I went to Rutgers Newark. Like, they are definitely in the postmodernist woke thing. I wouldn't open my mouth. I'm just there, to do my job and get out. But now you're at a party, and now
I used to rattle the cage a little, but
yeah. Now you're at a party. You're gonna say, you're not under that authority. It's
right.
Like very
people
strange.
Are drinking. Yeah.
Because one of the things about the universities, and I tell you all the time, is that it's like fairyland.
Yeah.
It's not real life. Like, I guess I have this perspective, and you might agree too, because you went to Camden. I went to a commuter school.
Right, so we both went to Rutgers University.
Right.
You, the Newark campus?
Yeah, Newark campus.
So we're both satellite campuses. New Brunswick's
exactly,
the main
yeah.
one.
So
you Newark, me Camden.
But, I would go to school, drive in with Nabil, and we would leave, not dorming, and then I would just work a part-time job. And those part-time jobs, I felt like, this is another thing, too. I'm really coming at kids who dorm, but, nonetheless, I still will. When it's like, oh yeah, I work. It's like, oh yeah, what do you do? It's like, oh, I work at the university at some department. Like, or I work at I'm a lifeguard at the pool at the school. Like, okay. Like, you're not in the real, you're still in that little bubble of fairyland.
Okay.
The only reason I bring that up is like when I have conversations with these kids, these students, whatever, that are my age, it's like we have a different worldview, because it's like, all right, I was doing valet. I would see people come in, older people, weddings, restaurants, whatever, you have that. It would be a plumber. I'd have to go. God, plumbing.
I just noticed until today that you had been a plumber.
Oh, really? Yeah. Stop and shop, putting out produce.
So I'm a little older than you. When did you go to college? Like what year to what year?
So 2015. Yeah, 2015 to 2019.
Okay, so I was 2013 to 2017. That's interesting. So did you feel that the woke stuff was already in full swing when you got there?
All right, Rutgers Newark is probably the worst. It's the most diverse campus.
You haven't been to TCNJ.
Well, it's the most diverse campus in the country. And by by diversity, it's like people of color, which is fine. Like, there'll be class, I'm the only white person in the class. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just explaining that, like, So they take the woke and that they almost make it their own. Like it's almost like they have to out woke the other universities to like build a name for themselves. Like for example, Obama was going to speak at New Brunswick. It was this big issue because like Newark students weren't invited, and then Newark's like, we're the real, black campus. Like how could this happen? It was a whole thing. They end up saying like, all right, the Newark students could come. It's like a whole thing. But
yeah, I do remember when Obama went there.
My biggest regret is I joined the honors program, much like yourself, and like that, those were my most crazy liberal classes. Like,
really?
Fake classes too. To this day, I got upset because I had to take like a class. It was a film class. I'm like decomposing or deconstructing film, and it's like I should be reading like manuscripts from the past. Why am I like watching Blade Runner? That I can't stand that. Like I'm sorry, I love film. If you're a theater major, maybe. But like, come on.
You want something a little more classical.
I want to read.
Okay.
And write. I don't know. I mean, and there's that. They made me take like a race ethnicity class, which is ironic because everything I learned in that class I like use against like people like this. And
so was that class kind of classically liberal in its outlook?
So what happened is, I went into a class and I don't even remember. It was about refugees, and she said something that like I was like, I'm not taking this class because she was this. Nabil's Pakistani, so I feel like I'm more familiar with Pakistan, but she was just trying to explain like this.
Nabil's your best friend. How long have you guys been best friends? Your whole life?
8th grade.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so a long time. The only reason I bring up Pakistan is like, so she was like, this is what she said. So I'm just giving her a life story. Okay. She was like upper class Pakistan. Somehow like was very disagreeable with her parents and wanted to like make her own life, so she came to America. She's like bashing on America, and like she's like, I could go back to Pakistan anytime. It's like I'd have a better life there. Like I'm like upper class over there. I'm like, all right. Like first of all, you're being pretentious, like, And second of all, it's like then go back.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's the common immigrant thing, but the only reason I say this
she
is like,
said it first.
But no, scratch the shitting on America. I kid you not. She's like, I'm like upper class in Pakistan.
Yeah, there's an elitist component there.
Yeah, and I can't.
Well, race is a good segue here because I wanted to get. So here's something I wanted to talk to you about with Hamilton. So just to start with this, you and I have a similar couple of criticisms of Hamilton going in, which is that the initial controversy about Hamilton is that obviously these are black and Hispanic largely actors, and as I remember it, this was done like by design on purpose. I mean, obviously it was. I mean, it's not like they like held casting calls for founding fathers and like these are the people who showed up. You know what I mean? Right. Like they said.
Well, yeah, I have a picture that says white people do not apply, but go on.
You have to show this, and so like just that sentiment already is like. You and I being more classical, I don't want to speak for you. Tell me whenever I say you and I, if it's inaccurate, but my feeling is that we're like, I'm not against, like, because of freedom of association and free expression, I'm not against the doing of it in the sense that like sometimes, like, but what's funny is almost always I would justify it the opposite way. I would say, oh, to be historically accurate, I'm only casting white people. I would not be going in just saying like, I just like white people or I just want to give white people opportunity. Like that feels
this
racist.
Is what I'll say about it.
Well, let me just burn through this real quick because I want to set something up because that's obviously the initial controversy. I think it's a bit of a shame because I love the play. I think it does a good job, and I think that probably some people who are just too conservative like won't even get past it to check it out. But I mean, look, it did. I think it did okay, but you know what I mean. But there's that, and then there's something worse than that because that you can sort of say, oh, stop being so stuffy, whatever. Art is always this sort of liberal progressive thing. There's sort of always some quirky thing. They're supposed to be pushing the boundaries and challenging you. But the thing that bothers us, I think, more is they do that. But then anyone who's a bad guy in the show, particularly the British, are purposely cast as white. Now, you're hiding behind the fact that because these characters are always like really like lame. And that the excuse for that is obviously that this is supposed to be an explicitly anti-English and pro-American spirit. And so I like that they're making fun of King George. I like that they're making fun of his little minions and all of that. But the idea that part of how they're going to do that is say, oh, we'll hire some white people, but this is the role they'll play. There's an ugliness there. And so what I'm building to is what I see as the fundamental tension in Hamilton is that you have all that stuff, which feels kind of woke, feels kind of like this dumb new thing that's replacing classical liberalism. And I should define what I mean by that, which is like MLK Jr., this is like content of your character, not skin. This is class, like cashing in on what the founders wrote, as you were implying earlier, and saying we're going to really do the born equal thing. We're going to really be colorblind. We're going to really, be fair, and a meritocracy and all these things. The fundamental tension for me is you have those things. But then when you look into it, and I really like Lin-Manuel Miranda, when you look into it, when he talks about this, it's a really interesting story. He says that he's in an airport and he sees the book. So this play is based on the famous, is it Ron Chernow or Rob? I think it's Ron. Ron Chernow's book, Alexander Hamilton, famous biography. As I understand it from some other interviews, that kind of put Hamilton on the map, like made him more of a studied figure. Like that book was kind of a... because I think that's what they're implying in the play at the end of like, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story? I think they're implying that like, why did it take until this like somewhat recent biography for him to be a focus? Notwithstanding, he's on our money and stuff. You know what I mean? It's not.
Well, he was going to get off the $10 bill.
And we'll get to that. But the fundamental issue for me is he goes he's in the airport, he sees it. For whatever reason, he picks it up. So Lin-Manuel Miranda. So let me add in one more ingredient. When you look at the woke, and I don't want to say I know that Lin-Manuel or the people in this, I don't want to pretend I know all of their politics or how much wokeness they've imbibed or how much postmodernism, but it's clearly something that's been on the rise for years on the left. There's this there's something that they say all the time and imply all the time is that you couldn't possibly understand me because we're different races, and vice versa. They really push racial essentialism in a sense, because it's like you couldn't possibly understand what it's like to be black. I couldn't possibly understand what it's like to be white. Why are we even trying? That's the kind of sentiment, and that's ugly. But here's Lin-Manuel Miranda, I believe he's Puerto Rican, Hispanic guy, in the airport for whatever reason sees this founding father, white guy, picks up this book. He's interested. He's reading it, and the way he describes it is the way this play came about, which makes me more sympathetic to the decision to cast it all black and Hispanic, because he says he's reading this and he goes, it's very interesting. He says, I see this immigrant who is poor and makes a name for himself and money and success by writing, and he sees hip-hop culture in that. People in maybe the ghetto who then rap and make something of themselves. So he sees being sort of the other in a sense, and then using writing to increase your lot. And so here's the fundamental tension. You have a Hispanic guy reading about a white guy and relating it to black and Hispanic people of today. And once you root it that way, I'm kind of happy to have him say we're going to do rap music and hip hop and we're going to have these people play it. But then on the other hand, you have this woke race war component of let's make fun of white people on the show. And on top of that, this fundamental thing that like look, again, like I said, I don't want to pretend I know what Lin-Manuel believes and everything like that. We know, you and I know, I would be very surprised if someone wants to pretend this isn't true. Huge audience loves Hamilton. Clearly, the more progressive, the more left-wing is where that really, it's like very popular among like sort of elite these people, which wokeness is popular among. How can they both say this thing all the time of we couldn't possibly understand each other? And our favorite play is by a guy who related this white guy to modern black culture. You see what I'm saying about this fundamental tension? It's like, yeah. Literally, the thing that's supposed to be impossible is the foundation of the play, and then the play then plays into the woke movement that says it's impossible to relate. Because one more thing on that one of the ways this will show up is that they'll say, there's no black female physicists, or relatively few, because they don't have any to look up to. Children can only have heroes who look like them. Our teachers, our police, people should look like the people they're serving. As if like a child never becomes impressed by someone who doesn't look like them.
Right. So I think they did. So just to add in quickly, like I think they did what I think that most like, I'll just use myself, Italian American, right? Like, you become, I think Abraham Lincoln once said it, like, you become an adopted son of the Republic.
That's beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, you become an adopted, and it's like, yeah, he took the spirit, right, as almost every American has to.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're black, white, or whatever, and it's still your history.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's that cultural lineage rather than genetic lineage.
Well, I will say why I'm upset, though, in his decision. Black was fine, but this is how I view it. He could say the hip-hop thing and whatever. I mean, he's the creator. He knows his own vision. But it's a reimagining of 1776. This was this generation's idea of 1776. I think he missed the bar because you could have added an Asian person in that. You could have added one white person and one main thing without the villain being white. And actually, and I'm not just saying this because like I'm theoretically white. I'm saying because we need to unify.
Your vision of why you should, a good reason to do that is to say, I'm trying to emphasize that it's got nothing to do with genetics or race. It's got to do with the ideology adopted son. And so I'm going to have everyone represented to show that melting pot thing is built into the ideals.
Yeah, imagine rewatch Hamilton. Like you redo Hamilton, and it's a true mix. You have Asian, white, or whatever. You could still do the hip hop. You could help. You could still make a majority black. You know, maybe make Madison white or whatever. The only reason I bring this up is that when you watch the play, it really reads that it's white versus black. If you really watch it too, like it almost implies that there's a revolution going on right now.
Especially when they push so often in weird ways the abolitionist messaging and the immigrant messaging.
Yeah, the abolitionist thing is like truly like it just.
And at the end of the day, if you're gonna keep pushing this kind of divisive woke thing of white versus black, then at that point, like, because again, cultural appropriation, I don't believe this. We just said that our whole point is that, you know, you're an adopted son of the Republic no matter who you are. If you're a citizen, this is your legacy. I want you to love it and understand it and everything. You want us to unify us. But if you believe in cultural appropriation, you believe it's delineated by racial lineage, which is a disgusting belief, but nonetheless, that is effectively the belief of many woke people. They've said it directly to me. Then the whole play was cultural appropriation, right? Which is a gross thing to say. I don't believe that. But the idea that this, like if they were being consistent, right? Because they'll say Eminem is culturally appropriating, then Lin-Manuel Miranda and everyone in there that was a person of color was appropriating this culture of 1776, which implies it's a white thing, and it's not. It's just a very ugly.
I don't believe in cultural appropriation.
No, it's complete nonsense.
It is. It almost implies intellectual property of.
Right. Yeah, group owned intellectual property by, right? It's just silly.
It's just ridiculous.
But on top of that, in the sociological literature, which by the way is going to skew very left. Anyway, the term, a term of their trade is, or I should say of their field, is cumulative culture. Our best scientific understanding of culture is that what Matt Ridley calls ideas having sex is this mixing of always mixing. There is no, Well,
I think that's the fundamental problem. This
is how we make progress. We take the best from everyone. We mix. We match.
Right, and right now, I think that show shows it is like if you're not in there, it's ironic because in the past it was obviously like, are you in the white club? Now it's like, are you in the people of color club?
I think it's different. I think it's, are you in the elite progressive club? Which is probably way mostly white, but that's mostly because we're our population.
Well, I think, all right, but look at Get Out. Get Out is once again trying to separate that because it's about white liberals. But so it's almost like they align themselves against like moderates.
But who loves Get Out more than a white progressive? This is kind of what I'm saying. Like the fans of those movies are like, let's go find me a blonde girl out there. Mm-hmm. She's the fan of all this woke shit.
But that's because, like, literally, like, I can't believe it, but people don't get it. Like, they watch Get Out, and they're like, oh, yeah. It's like, no, it's about you. They're trying to separate themselves from you. It's a very strange thing. And
I like the movie, by the way. I think that
yeah, it's a great movie.
I had a gun to his head when he said that.
But once again, like, I hate, like, I think
the mistake is to set it by race, but they're doing that in the ideology, and yet...
But here's this is what I'm seeing. I think this is the most racist time I've ever seen. Because I just believe in the logos. Everyone has a logos. If you do something that violates someone's logos by an ulterior thing, gender, whatever, like, it's not racism, but to me, it's like you're misguided. And
I don't know if that picked up on the recording because you're speaking quickly. He didn't say the most racist time ever. He said most racist time he's seen. The guy's only in his 20s. I don't want someone, people straw man. You'll be like, what about slavery? It's like, yeah, but Ty said he saw it. In our time, we were born into a very classical liberal childhood where we were taught. This is what's crazy. When you and I, well, you tell me if this is true, but I'll say it for me. When I was in elementary school, I learned about MLK Jr. probably too much, but every single year, and it was all about color blindness. That word used specifically. These were not like ultra conservative Republican teachers, by the way. Color blindness, neutral principles of constitutional law, all of these things, equality. Now there's a push, and it's happening as well. Like kids are being taught the woke thing instead, which is that color blindness is a bad word. We should actually privilege people who are historically oppressed. This whole new thing that you're complaining about that is sometimes called reverse racism, which is obviously a non-term because racism doesn't imply which race to which. Like you can have a Chinese guy who's racist against Mexicans. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But they'll say the word reverse racism because in America anyway, when you say racism, the assumption right off the bat for historical reasons is white, black, and then.
Well, I disagree with that, but yeah.
Well, like, for historical reasons, that's what is thought by people. I'm not saying it's accurate.
That because like when I said like there's Arabs were racist towards like blacks. I know Arabs are considered white, but like when we're talking about the white tradition, could necessarily
these people would tell you that they were exhibiting white supremacy. Like this is how muddy the terminology is getting from the woke people. And it's on purpose. But we'll get into that another time. I'm writing something called the Sophistructure about this. I am worried that us skirting around the topic a little bit leaves a little bit too much ambiguity, but I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you what you want to do with this.
Yeah, no, I'll just sum it up. Like it's just unity. Like I can't explain it other way. Like just enough with the division because you keep dissecting groups. It's actually if they read the Hamilton letters, he talks about factions, right?
Yeah.
It's like factions are basically groups of people that are more concerned with their own group than like say the Republic. Catholics, because I'm Catholic. It's like they might like a group of Catholics might just care what's good for Catholics as opposed to what's good for the Republic.
This was one of those interesting things I read so far in those founding documents is, and who wrote this? Was it? So I know that it's mentioned by Thomas Paine in Common Sense, but before that, Sam Adams mentions it. Maybe it was it in the Declaration? I don't. He mentions that. They talk about the depopery of religion, so Protestantism. And it's interesting because oftentimes we just think of it as like, okay, yeah, there are religious sects and things split and whatever, and you might think about like divorce and blah, blah, blah. To have them mention it in this way of, they use two words, depopery and Protestantization, meant to mean, it's a way of expressing their libertarian ideals in the sense that it's like this takes scripture out of the hands of an elite speaking down to us in Roman Latin and lets us now as agents, as Enlightenment thinkers, every man for himself read the Bible and interpret it and make an argument. So we're all participating. It's an intellectual exercise. And so he says that America is going to be the depopery or the Protestantization of politics. And so now men are going to argue and talk about political matters rather than be dictated to. And so what was interesting about that is I then thought about, you learn in high school, and my mom told me because she was there, with JFK that people were worried, like first Catholic president, and is he going to take orders from the Pope and funny stuff like that. And this is 20th century, far later, 300 years after the document I'm reading. And I saw it in a new light all of a sudden. I don't know how true this is literally, but like when I'm taught that by my mom or the high school teacher, shout out to Mr. Camps, it's taught just as a basic like prejudice thing. And that's certainly partially true. Like we still haven't had our first Jewish president. It'll be very controversial if it comes close, like with a Bernie Sanders. And so it's taught as like, it was just prejudice against Catholics and what. But once I read that, I thought, there might actually be something a little more to it in the sense that, like, it might. I think that had something to do with it, of course, prejudice. But at the same time, did somehow that cultural tradition get inherited by people all the way up till then? Of like, it wasn't that Catholicism was bad, or that it was this idea that it was not libertarian. It's just interesting. Like, is that lineage somehow affecting people's worry about JFK, for example? Now, of course, JFK is the libertarian tradition of America and so forth. It was unfounded. This is not a guy who was like Catholic in the sense of being elitist Pope following 1600s Catholic.
Yeah.
But did that somehow inform it in a way that is a little deeper and more interesting than just basic? Anytime there's a new kind of president, you're a little worried. People are a little worried. I don't know. It just jumped out at me because I wasn't taught to me.
It would be interesting. The thing is, though, is that like in the 60s, JFK, I think that's more just of like the question of like, because it is strange. Catholicism is a weird religion where it's like you have the head pope, right?
Right.
Like in theory, if you're a devout Catholic, theoretically, shouldn't you be following orders of the Pope? It's a very strange thing.
Yeah, because and he'll make political decree. I mean, our current pope is like talking about climate change.
It's just sad at this point. Like, I don't know. Just so I make it clear that like I think the time has come where like philosophy should be organized almost like the Catholics are, in that sense, in that hierarchy. Like because like that's what they're trying to do. But like the thing is medieval synthesis is probably like something that always blows my mind. Where like they're trying to take Aristotle and synthesize it with Christianity. And you've even said with science, they did the same thing. Oh, we found something. Does it align with the Bible?
The project of academia was to bring stuff in alignment with Christian.
Right, and the thing is like, all right, the Pope's talking about climate change. Like, that's fine, and hopefully it does some good. But the thing is, I think that's limited because, not coming at Christians, because you know me, like if you're faithful to a religious dogma, good for you because you have an ethic, you have a standard that you live by. My point is that in the modern world with the chaos going out there, that's not going to win. That's not winning this intellectual battle.
So it's worth mentioning we're culturally Catholic. Neither one of us is a true Catholic in any sense of like a religious sense.
But I will say like my Catholic education, at least in high school, really taught me fundamentals.
Did you go to Catholic school?
Yeah, I went to Don Bosco Prep.
I didn't know this.
Yeah,
I'm just a public school kid.
Yeah, it's all boys' school too. But they taught me. It's ironic. They taught me what these colleges don't anymore. And that's just like the canon of literature and philosophy and stuff. Like I took my philosophy class in year was taught by the principal. I thought it was interesting.
I never took philosophy until college.
Yeah.
Although I did have a great English teacher, Mr. Wilson, who did do some in English 4. I don't know if that was curriculum or if he was getting that in there, including logic, and he also taught us how to debate, which
yeah.
It's a double-edged sword because for the rest of my life I would be accused of like being too sure of myself or this or that. But one of the big rules of debate is formal debate, and I bring it everywhere, is state your case solidly. Don't be wishy-washy. State it like you believe it. You're trying to win this argument here. Now, of course, you don't want to just be playing pure rhetoric. You want to believe what you say, but don't be, I'll couch my language to the degree that I think it's scientifically accurate to. Right? This is a hypothesis, not a proven theory. This is empirically supported. This, I think, I'm speculating. But be a little forceful. You're in an argument. You know what I mean? State your damn case. Make it like it's a fight. I liked that, but it's certainly people get upset.
The phrase is the first person a lawyer convinces is themselves. Like that's the first person. So like, you're reading the case. Like you have to convince yourself first, and then you argue.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. Yeah, it's a strange thing because what happens too, like now we're just talking, like I feel like at 23, like I'll go to parties, people want to debate these topics, and they're like, oh, you're never wrong. It's like, no, I've just done more research, so it's like a dam. Like you have to bring a lot of evidence to the table to convince me otherwise.
Well, you and I also don't tend to talk about things we don't know about.
Well, that's the thing too. Like,
I don't want to toot our own horn because certainly we do. Like everyone makes mistakes, but like there is a epidemic of people just speaking out of their asses about things they've never read anything about.
Yeah, I had a law friend who was arguing about ancient Rome. Mm-hmm. It's like, dude, come on. He was a computer science major. He's one of those people.
He's taking shots at my people now.
Yeah, but he's just one of those people who just like to argue. And I kid you not, like he's pulling up Wikipedia articles.
Dude, you can't pull up anything. Like the fact is, if you read it and understood it, it's in your fucking head. Like every time I've mentioned something, I point to the book on the shelf and cite it without opening it. Now, it wouldn't be a problem if I opened it if I already read it. But you can't fucking pull it up and read it for the first time in front of me and I can't stand when people do that.
Yeah.
They're like, see? They're like holding the phone up. You're like, you don't even know what you're like. And this is the thing. Like, these are people who Like, they're really know-nothings because they don't have a brain. They've got a phone. Like working knowledge. You need working knowledge.
The thing is, too, is history, just like as someone who studied history, is like, you really need to connect multiple dots. Because, like,
true of everything.
They cherry pick history.
Yeah.
They'll find Hamilton, like, spoke out about slavery once, right? And all of a sudden he, like, if he didn't die early, he could have, like, no.
And you're going to talk about Jefferson as though he isn't known literally for writing.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories of Jefferson, he's writing to a French person, and he's talking about Virginians. It is true, though. Jefferson was a little too much about the Virginians. Like, come on, now, you're starting a republic. You know.
How do you feel about Monticello?
Yeah, I'm not like, I respect Jefferson for his time. Because another thing is, too, is everyone, it's like, we're in 2020. They didn't want a national bank.
And this is like, you know, these are like, yeah, the idea of taking historical context into account is also white supremacy.
But he basically in the letter, he just goes like, Virginia, I forget what he says, like he's complimenting them, and then basically goes like, but their biggest like failing is slavery, like their biggest vice is slavery. He just says that flat out.
Right.
I think he was an intellectual. I think he struggled with those concepts.
Yeah. But that was a really important thing to me, and I can't remember who said it, but I was reading. So you said something funny to me recently, which was, you're only in adulthood realizing that people don't tend to find history interesting, because it's always been interesting to you. It's like an innate trait you have. It's an innate interest you have that you fostered. And I have taken certain things for granted, like that people would care about making sense or being consistent. Okay, but I was one of those people, though, as a kid. Like, I was always interested in video games, and I ended up doing video game development. That's kind of how I got into computer science and physics as a teenager and adult. It started in that more shallow thing. I love video games, don't get me wrong, but it's nothing compared to like the tradition of physics or computer science or serious contribution to the world. And as a kid, I wasn't into history. I thought I was bored by it much of the time. But I remember in middle school, Mr. Wiskowitz class, I wish I remember too. I think it was a colonist, but I was reading this, and he's talking about the sort of pro-abolition argument. Like, people don't realize this is like a huge controversy among the founders. Like, it's not like they didn't spend time agonizing over slavery, yay or nay, why, how. Like that's the other thing. Like, it's not easy to do either. So people just act like, oh yeah, just, you know, like it'd be fine if we just
especially.
In fact, when we did that finally with Abraham Lincoln, there were problems. You had to eat that eventually, and it'd be better or worse and more possible times to do it. But yeah, hindsight's so easy to import your morals into, like, it's easy to stop slavery today in America because there is none. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no fight.
The thing is like when you have industry, that, you know, industrial revolution, it's a lot easier.
Right. And yeah, we can also recognize that this was a moral failing, even at the time, of a different nature than it would be today, of course. Like, I'm sorry, I can judge Jefferson for slavery, but I'm not, like, if you right now, all right, I'm not going to implicate you. If we find a guy on the street outside and he just takes a slave right in front of us, I'm going to judge that guy more than a historical figure in a time where it was normal.
I always say every civilization, not every civilization, but most civilizations had slavery, but America's biggest sin is that, you know, it was based on race and skin color. Because the thing is in Rome, right? I mean, we even had emperors who were previous slaves. Because the thing is like, you're my slave, I free you. Now you walk on the streets of Rome, they don't know whether you're free or not. You could say, yeah, I'm from, you know, Sicily. They don't know. But Americans found it's not even Americans, it's really the English or whatever. Nonetheless, they found a way that they'll be able to identify you no matter what.
This is very obvious.
And that's why I argue a lot with these liberals, because one of the reasons I love the classical era is there really isn't racism. Because the Greeks thought you take a black man, you put him in Greece, he'll be white in like 2 generations. They really didn't understand this idea of race.
I'm always suspicious of these claims that there wasn't still prejudice based on phenotypic difference.
There's prejudice. But race is dark because it almost has pseudoscience backing it.
That's this modern conception of racism, but I guess I just take a broader definition of the term of like...
Well,
for me, it's like if you're taking a phenotype of a people and using it to identify them and say things about them that are, makes them inferior, I suspect that's a human universal back through time. I don't have direct evidence supporting that.
No, because I think
because think about it. Like, if someone wears a shirt that's different, people are making fun of them. Like humans latch on to like out-group, in-group type stuff.
Yeah, but like, all right, we know like in the ancient world they'll be like, all right, the Greeks are brave and the barbarians are savages, right? And like, is that racism? The reason why I think racism, in my understanding, is like you have like pseudoscience. You have Charles Darwin, and all of a sudden, actually, remember the upper class I was telling you about, the Europeans. The first things that they were doing is they were trying to say that they came of higher stock than the commoners. Mm-hmm. They actually were trying to imply that their genetics were superior. Mm-hmm. Then that will eventually turn to just racism against Africans and indigenous people. But the reason I bring that up is that's different. Because as the Romans developed, like eventually it was like, oh yeah, he's, Syrian, but, he fought in the legions. No. In this country, in the beginning, it's like, you are inferior to me. Mm-hmm. That's something that the Greeks couldn't even fathom. The noble savage is an idea that comes there. That's why...
So I remain skeptical in the sense that I'd be surprised if you couldn't find... Because let's just say there's some prejudice somewhere.
Well, let me ask you this.
Just real quick. In ancient Rome, let's say that, like, based on some phenotype, maybe it's skin color, maybe it's something else, nose shape, some phenotype that separates, or maybe it's just literal nationality.
Right.
And there's some idea of inferior spirit. And then the idea that these people did, like, 'cause people do this in all times, didn't confabulate explanations. That's all pseudoscience is a confabulated explanation.
All right, but how about this? This is a thought, like, this is a very controversial statement to say, but I don't think most people are racist nowadays. There are. I've seen them on the internet. The difference is like, a lot of the stuff that they're complaining is racism is, like, prejudice. It's, cultural, I don't even know.
I guess we're getting into a semantic argument.
But yeah. I'll say this, though, is that, like I said, it's that, no, you truly are inferior. Like, your genetics are inferior. Mm-hmm. That is what I see as, like, the danger. Mm-hmm. But
I'm not too worried about like small.
But I guess I'm coming from the law aspect. You have judges saying no, like, they say the black person is like, I read case opinions, where they're almost making subclasses of people. I don't know. Maybe I just read optimistically in the classical world, but.
Yeah, I don't know. So you're going by historical. Like, ultimately, I would need some empirical evidence. What I'm going by is a more first principles thing, which is that when I ask myself, well, what was racism in some ways here, and it's an in-group, out-group thing based on an obvious phenotypic difference. Of course, historical elements matter a lot, and then assuming a pretty constant human nature between the two eras. And people, again, the pseudoscience thing is a somewhat modern way of defining racism, and I don't like it because there's always been pseudo-explanations for stuff. And in fact, it would have been worse going back in time because we knew less. So, like, the idea that I couldn't find... I'd be surprised if I couldn't find a document of someone talking about a difference between two peoples in which one was inferior, and them confabulating why.
Well,
I'm skeptical. Now, it may not have been as bad.
Well, I would disagree because in that era of time with Charles Darwin, they're starting to understand evolution, too. And that's why, like, after the Olympics, where black athletes are doing better, they start saying, oh, well, it makes sense, and they come up with, like, terrible ideas that, like,
there's an extra
they're hunter-gathering and shit like that. That's not in Rome.
Right. So here's my point, is that it doesn't matter, like it doesn't matter that, so here's the difference. Because you have true science, and the more your pseudoscience tries to get the patina of real science, the more likely it might be to be accepted by people who can't tell the difference. So you might be able to make the argument that until you have a good science of inheritance, once you have a good science of inheritance, you can more easily concoct a believable pseudoscience. That's possible that's helping. But my point is that pseudo-confabulations happen all the time and are believed in all times. And so the idea that they didn't notice difference and notice differences between groups, some of which we would classify as racist in terms of calling one superior inferior, and then confabulating some reason why, and it may have been the gods did this, like Herod did this when they were forming their civilization. I don't care what the explanation is. My point is that that's all pseudoscience to me.
But you don't have that in the ancient world. Whether it's possible or not, you don't have that.
I'm saying I'm skeptical I couldn't find it. That's all I'm saying.
There's another problem too, and this is why
So this is a hypothesis. I'm not saying I have that empirical.
This is the problem with history too. Like, all right, you got one guy, and just a thought. So you got one guy in Athens who can't stand, like, helots in Sparta. It says they're inferior, whatever. That's one guy. You know, the problem is with pseudoscience is like you have an entire continent, even America, like buying into this. It's almost pseudoscience. Like if you take pseudoscience and make it science, it's almost like, oh, you don't believe in that, then you just aren't believing in science itself.
Right, like myths that are like false myths that are widespread believed.
Right.
I'm just saying those have existed at all times.
What I will say nonetheless is that I also think, like, I really thought about it. Like, I think that's why coming out of the Civil War era, Reconstruction, even now, I mean, think about it. You are, oh my God, like it's 2020, so 40 years from now, you're approaching nearly 200 years since the end of slavery, and there's still terrible problems.
Well, I'll move on, but I will. One other piece of very circumstantial, not even evidence, just suggestion, just this kind of thing I'm thinking about is if you go to something like sex instead, you can find Aristotle saying things about women that are untrue, which include quote unquote explanations for why they're inferior, which is pseudoscience, and that's in ancient times and probably was pretty well subscribed to because it was said by this elite philosopher, and it's the same kind of thing. Like I can't think of an example at the moment. One gender studies.
This is really going to get me in trouble, but I'll say it anyway, is that there are, and I'm not, men and women are equal, but I think the difference is that race is pseudo. It's fake.
See, I don't agree with this.
Oh, you don't agree?
But explain what you mean by this.
Just the genetics is that, like, race doesn't exist. You
I
think
don't
it
buy
does?
this. I don't buy this. So here's where I go with this. We're really getting down some weird paths now. I think this is a kind of modern myth. I attribute this to the postmodern stuff too, ultimately, but this is actually being like pushed by biologists and geneticists in a lot of cases. So I see that as a partial political infiltration of those fields. In the sense that, notwithstanding, I suspect some people are genuinely convinced, but like I can't imagine how. Well, let me just get to the crux of it. The crux of it is that taking semantics out of the argument, which a lot of it ends up boiling down to, because should you use the word race? Okay, well, I'm using the word race. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, like, what makes you Italian? And we're going to simplify because a lot of us are mutts. What makes you Italian and Nabil Pakistan? Is it a social construct? Should I say Pakistani? How do you? I guess so. Pakistani American, but we're speaking in terms of so-called race because now we're saying, is it real or not? What makes you Italian and him Pakistani? Well, genes. I mean, that's what it is. Like, we have ideas about what that means that may or may not be true. That are because there's cultural differences as well, which there's a huge controversy about how much of that can be attributed to genetic difference versus historical difference, yada yada. But of course, much of it is, historical, obviously. But my point is that, like, growing up, I kind of thought race meant, in a precise way, like it largely grafted onto nationality, but that it meant like the reason your skin color is your skin color and someone else's is their skin color, or your nose takes the shape that it does and their nose takes this other shape. All these phenotype is genetics, and they are shared among a race.
So this is what the studies show. So me and you, right? I mean, you're Italian, you're German, simplified, but nonetheless, they would say we're white. So if they take your DNA, they take my DNA, and then they're like, all right, how similar are these two?
Yeah.
They would find that we're as similar as if you took two black people's DNA, or if you took two Hispanics' DNA, or if you took two Asians. And that's why, like, race doesn't really exist, because, like you said, the skin color may stay the same, but underneath the complexity of the
But it's not
genes,
just skin. There's so many phenotypes.
But because those don't matter apparently in these environments, it varies.
So my understanding is this: the claim tends to be there's more different genetic difference between individuals in the same racial group than differences in the average genotype of two groups. So what that means is if I take the genotype of all Irish and all Egyptian and compare them, I get X. If I take one random Irish and another random Irish, and that difference is Y, then that difference of Y between the two Irishmen is bigger than the difference between the conglomerate of the two races. That doesn't say that race isn't real. Like, it just doesn't.
Well,
all it means is that there's a lot of variation at the individual level, which is true. But the point is that, and people like Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying have pointed out that this is just kind of, they claim that this is just a basic statistical fact. But at the end of the day, like you and I know that we can walk down the street, and it's not perfect, but of course, like even just with the phenotype that are visual, and many aren't, you can narrow down what someone's quote unquote race is at above chance rates. If we were just making it up, it wouldn't work. You know what I mean? You're like, that guy's Italian, that guy's Pakistan, that guy, and it's not, you're not perfect at it, but the thing that caused that isn't, they weren't taught to be a different color. You know what I mean? They weren't taught to have different heights, and so one of my favorite ways is that Steven Pinker put it in, he wrote an essay in This Idea is Dangerous, edited by John Brockman, where what he claimed is that if you actually allow yourself to, I don't want to get this wrong, I think he said if you actually allow yourself to enumerate over many traits rather than just taking like one, I don't want to get this wrong, so check for yourself in that book. And I think that I wrote a little review of that book on Instagram that has this quoted in it, or at least mentioned. But you can do something like that where you get to where you allow yourself to look at multiple phenotype, and suddenly they do clump into what are generally looked at as thought of as classical races. And the argument is simple, which is that what is a race? Well, we all have a common ancestor in Africa. There's like a tiny bit of controversy about that now, I think, but generally it's accepted that it's in Africa. That's the first Homo sapiens. And through different events, humans have moved to every continent and different places in those continents. The way evolution by natural selection works is you get selected for your environment over time. Well, these groups of people were in relative isolation for pretty long periods of time. I mean, not extremely long. Of course, we didn't speciate, right? We can all still mate, and we're all still human. We're all still Homo sapiens. But we were isolated in different enough environments for long enough that we diverged evolutionarily a little bit. We have adaptations that are like it's actually for an ancestor, for a recent ancestor's environment, this skin color is more advantage than that, has more advantages than that other one. Now, in modern times, we've unisolated and we're all mixed. So mutts like us, you know, on top of which we have technology, oftentimes we're going to have hodgepodges and phenotypes that aren't necessarily adapted to the environment we're in. I mean, remember, if we were adapted to where we're standing right now, we'd probably be red-skinned. Right? When people were isolated here, the Native Americans, they had this adaptation. So
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, this is biology. I just don't understand.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I don't know.
I see this as it's just to tie a bow on that. I think there are people out there of this form of progressivism that doesn't care about objective truth, because you and I hate racism and want to get rid of racism and think we've made a lot of progress on that. That think that the only way to get rid of racism, or the best way, is to get rid of race. If race isn't real, then racism is a logical fallacy, right? And I just think it's a silly
That is
tactic.
interesting, because that is a lot what they're doing with the genders as well.
Yes, and one last thing I should say, there is, on top of that, what I consider a semantic debate, which is that people say, there's the issue of colorism. Of course, color is one phenotype, and that's not a good idea for race. But so race for me again has to be isolated to like you're German, you're Irish, and blah. But the part like when it's a geneticist or a biologist making the argument, typically they understand what I just said about the evolutionary divergence. They just say, oh, you shouldn't call that race, you should call that a population. Like, well, that's a semantic argument. What do you mean race isn't real? You're talking about populations now. Okay, it's a euphemism, right? I mean, yeah. So that's annoying. But anyway, you continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I just think because the whole point about like whether there's race or not,
yeah,
is like what I will say by Aristotle on that is like obviously, and this is what me and you have like noticed, is like obviously there's differences between men and women. Doesn't mean any are superior than the other.
Yeah.
And right now you see is that they're trying to get away those differences.
Yeah. these are bigger differences than the racial ones too, because they're more ancient. Like,
Yeah.
the races diverged. I mean, look, Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years. I don't know when different populations moved where, but 300,000 years versus sexual dimorphism goes back to long before we were human. We inherited that from a common ancestor, I'd hazard a guess, at least millions of years ago. And so that has had time to...
So what I will say
really
about
change.
this, so I go against the feminists that try to destroy like ideas of femininity and masculinity, because I actually think femininity would be better for civilization in certain respects. So like, if you're going purely by general ideas, maybe more philosophical, like what's the feminine philosophical and like masculine philosophy, whatever. My point is though, is that like women tend to be more diplomacy, right? Just generally speaking.
Well, men are more aggressive and women are more
Right,
agreeable.
and I think in the modern world, like you want like a more feminine viewpoint in like certain areas. That'd be good. And so, like it's, you know, and the reason I just bring this up is like I don't understand why when you take away like the gender differences, you lose that. And also, I think you just go against human nature.
Yes.
And I
this
think
is a
that's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
you
So
know.
Pinker's maybe his most famous book, The Blank Slate. The subtitle is the modern denial of human nature, and that he really was getting at something there, because so many of these debates come down to people on one side saying, well, there is I'm not even saying that the natural thing is better and that it means it's good, which is called the naturalistic fallacy. I'm just saying that we have to work somewhat within the constraints of at least recognizing that there's a natural order to things here that's inherited, and the other side says, no, it's all just social conditioning. Like,
And people have told me, like, I've had arguments where it's like, oh, you're not a man, that's a social construct. It's like, no.
I just,
not even for my own ego, because they'll say, like, oh, you're just toxic masculinity. It's like, not even for my own ego. Like, I'm just telling you de facto that, like, I just have testosterone is flowing through the brain.
You get into this argument, and you want to go, all right, let's just pull our pants down right now and see if we can tell.
Yeah, I mean, also just personally, like, I don't know. It is ridiculous at times.
Yeah, and I don't know, and that is a very, and even that, like you were implying earlier, even that's kind of shoehorned into Hamilton of like girls will randomly sing like, and I'm of two minds though, because I want it in there in the sense that it's nice that they are, because they are alluding to the perfecting of the union and the cashing of the promissory note when they talk about abolition and women's suffrage so early. In terms of like the play takes place long before that stuff would really come to the fore. So in that sense, I do like it, because in one sense they are recognizing that it's supposed to be for everyone, but in another way they're doing it. They always feel the need to do it in a way that's so denigrating to the people at the time. Like, this should have been obvious to you, and you should have been able to do this then. And it's like everyone has the challenge of their time to perfect their union.
Yeah, slavery might not be the best example because it required a civil war. So I'm not going to use that. But as far as women's suffrage, like, how did it happen? It was a constitutional amendment. They developed, I think Marshall talks about the framers developed the frame. You know, it's almost like they set the boundaries. And that's the thing is like, if a feminist hates like the founders didn't allow women to vote or whatever, which actually is a state issue. Well, it can get murky, but generally speaking, but nonetheless, it's like you have to understand they set up a system that evolves to allow you to vote. Same as they set up a system that would allow me to come to the country and allow immigrants to come.
This is that beautiful Scalia quote that it was in one of his opinions. It was a dissent on a case that didn't go his way. That I actually heard on the Dark Horse podcast with Brett Weinstein and Heather Heim, who were both of the left, where he says it had something to do with like a school, like could a school be like exclusively male anymore or something like that.
Yeah, we had a huge debate of that in the class.
Well, he wrote in his dissent, I'll botch it, people should look it up, but just this beautiful thing where he's basically like, yeah, I'm losing this case and you guys are gonna get your thing, but I didn't, like, he's kind of like distasteful that all their opinions were like, they should like shitting on our ancestors, and he just says like, yeah, you know, they were flawed because they were from their time, and we're flawed in our time. It'd be hubristic for you guys to think you figured it all out, and people, like, you want people to be fair to you later, but he ends by saying, you know, so yeah, there are these problems with our ancestors, you're right, but let me, you know, balance this out and say a word in their praise. They left us free to change, and that's a beautiful thing. I mean, like you like there are processes you can follow. Like you don't need to get a goddamn judicial activist judge to play legislator. Like you can there are processes to pass amendments. There are processes to pass laws outside of changing the Constitution and the legislature. And so like if you want to say it's too hard, you have to get 2/3 vote, like all these different things. It's like they set up checks and balances on purpose. Go do it. Get the votes. Convince people.
That is why I argue with these progressives. Because if you do the 1619 to 1776, I've had people tell me the whole system is rotten to its core.
Yes.
America is racist to its core. It's like, if you believe that, then you're not for the system. You're not for changing and evolving. You want to tear it down and build up. And then this goes to the French Revolution. Edmund Burke, Birth of Conservatism, he says it's like a house, right? Don't go in and swing and destroy the house, because the house you build after it might not be as good. You really have to think and say, all right, I'm going to tear this down. Is the next thing I'm going to build be better, or should I repair it and maybe do some additions?
You're the first person to put these Supreme Court issues on my mind, because when I met you, even though I was against the Sophistructure stuff and I didn't like Trump, and we have our problems with Trump, you had told me about, you were more supportive of him at the time, and I was interested in meeting people who were, because I was sick of the like just extreme outrage. Like the guy sneezes and people are like, Hitler used to sneeze. You're like, okay. So it was interesting to get a perspective, and you were like that was the first time I heard it's a common position, but like vote Republican if you want Supreme Court justices appointed that are originalists. Well, that's a really legitimate reason to vote that way, and that I'd never heard at the time. But
well, yeah, because Scalia had died, and that was all.
Right.
Because it's ironic that we have the court we do now, because it's like the Republicans had won the Supreme Court battle, but at that time, Obama, like this is the thing about the liberals. Obviously, Scalia is as conservative as you get. Obama comes in and he puts a moderate, and everyone's like, look, it's a moderate, it's a Republican. Like how great that would have switched it so left. And the honest truth is that, like Trump, by the way, at this time period, obviously he's on the way out.
Yeah,
I had originally support. I was a devout Christian, like when I voted for Trump. So I really have changed philosophically.
Were you a Christian when I was talking to you at Val's?
I was probably I really was a wussy, because like I used to go like, I'll get this, made up a phrase like, I'm an agnostic Christian. What the fuck does that mean? But
that's awesome.
But the thing is like what really scares me about liberals specifically in law is like they'll just judicial activism to the 100%. They're not even like.
Well, they call it living constitution.
That is, do you know how Rome felt? I've had this argument, because, oh man, I actually probably never got so heated, because it was like the one thing my education could argue fully. How does Rome fall? Rome didn't write down a constitution. It was all precedent. It was as living constitution as you can get. And it just evolved.
Pure common law, is that what you would call that?
Almost. I mean, it wasn't common law, because it wasn't like people making decisions. Like,
here's what's interesting about our constitutional system is that, and it's just England, common law. We are a colony of them, and they had a lot of history up to that point. We make our constitution. Now, we do so taking with very smart people, the founding fathers, or dead white men, depends on your perspective, and they're obviously looking at ancient Greek and Roman, like really Western philosophy.
Yeah.
But they're also, of course, affected by English common law. And when you read their writings up to when they're trying really hard not to have to secede, they're saying things like, all we want are the rights that we would have when we lived back home.
Yeah, as Englishmen.
And so what's interesting is it's not like our Constitution was made whole cloth. It's actually also based in common law, but it's like their favorite parts they cemented in a way common law never can. Because
that's the thing.
Always malleable.
They always talk about the Charter of England. It comes from like the Magna Carta, and obviously like the Magna Carta doesn't talk about like freedom of speech.
Can you explain the Magna Carta? Because
I don't know English history that well.
Okay.
But the Magna Carta, from my understanding, is the French invade. they take over, and it's like an agreement that's like, all right, you were an English nobleman. It's like, all right, you have some rights because you're going to allow me to rule more or less. I don't know it that well, but that's the general gist I understand.
Okay.
But obviously, that's your document. That's what, like, we're arguing in America, 1776. It's like, we have rights from the Magna Carta. It's like, you can't really cite it. There's a tradition that develops from that because, there's a parliament at this point. There is a tradition, but it's not, I think the best word is articulated, right?
Okay.
And that's the thing. The founders come in and they articulate it. Or
So you've got flimsy common law, which is some would argue, an evolutionary process that yields. It's a good thing. It's a good system, and we still use precedent today. But at some point, some of the best things that have evolved, you want someone to explicitly justify.
Well, I view it like underpinnings, right?
Yeah.
Is like people. What really sucks is the founders made. I don't want to say a flaw, but they really didn't underestimate that. As time went on, people wouldn't know who. What's his name? Oh my God! I want to say John Adams. It's not John Adams. It's the guy for natural rights, John Locke. There we go. Okay. The average person doesn't know who John Locke is.
Right.
And the thing is early on in the early court opinions, you have judges who are like coming up with rights from these different philosophies. Wow. The thing that I'm coming up with is that it's not as articulated anymore. Like people like freedom of speech, and everyone's like, oh, cool, but they don't know where that comes from. And the originalists will read, it's like you have like an iceberg. Like here's that right, but underneath is so much history and tradition.
And this is, so we talked about, and I had you get a book today called Consilience, The Unity of Knowledge by E.O. Wilson. I'm stretching from that, but the idea of, for me, I do place a kind of split in knowledge between what I'm kind of calling classical, but that extends up until the present day. What I mean by it is classical versus postmodern or something like that, is that there are things about valid knowledge production, about objective reality, about seriously useful things that are similar. So like, for example, in physics, the derivation is king. And unless you start to like really get into physics in college and stuff, like if you're in high school doing physics, they're giving you equations and saying Newton discovered this equation. You're just like, whoa. And then they're like, all right, if x equals this and y equals that, solve the equation and tell me where and this is good. You can predict where a projectile will be after you throw it if you have initial conditions and stuff like that. But physics, like what a physicist means when he says physics, is the thing Newton did, which is discovering the equation, not just using it afterward. And that's called a derivation because you start with some principles, you start with some observations, you use some mathematics, and you get this equation to show up, and then you test it empirically, and, people will discover laws of nature. What you're talking about, interestingly, is you have these things like freedom of speech, and it's almost like when they're writing these opinions with citations and stuff, they're almost trying to derive the thing. They're almost trying to derive that right. And it's interesting, too, because the founders talk about natural rights or God-given rights, but the point being preceding government, because if they didn't give it to you, they can't take it away. And there's a kind of a... It's like they're placing axioms. And then in mathematics, you have axioms, and then you can work from there to deduce. And they're saying, these are axiomatic. These are ground truth. Work from there. So there's these things. When you look at postmodernism, and their whole idea is deconstruction, and it's all, there's no consistency. There's no similarities between, I don't know. There's a project that is not valid knowledge, the classical project, that it goes all the way back to ancient times. It's not just Western. Eastern countries have made contributions and but this is not part of it. Postmodernism is not a valid or real contribution to philosophy and to knowledge, and neither is the woke shit that is built from it. And yet we have increasingly portions of half the population just buying into this and making bad arguments based on, if you were to show the derivation of their argument, it would just be garbage, bias, and easily contradicted by actual knowledge.
I actually think the postmodernists have sinned in the greatest way, is that it's like you're handed down a tradition and you evolve it and you push it forward, and instead they threw it out.
Yes, and so I've said that in the first chapter of the Sophistructure about the ancient Greek sophists, I said it about them, I first thought about the postmodernists, is the hubris of thinking this is true anytime, but like it's really funny when you point out that like these are French people in the 1960s, like really recent. The hubris of thinking that because these people read ancient philosophy, like don't get it wrong that they're so ignorant that they like didn't think anyone thought until then. They knew of and read this stuff. I mean, look, the foremost feminist journal is called Hypatia. They had the hubris to say, oh yeah, we've got, what, 2,000-3,000 years of knowledge production and people agonizing and working towards, like you're saying, pushing this forward and fighting and grappling with it. All of it's wrong. We're the first smart people. We've got this. We're starting over with this postmodern shit.
Yeah.
The hubris of that, I mean,
It's...
And these are not impressive people. Foucault, I mean, even a woke person isn't going to tell you Foucault's Einstein. Like, why is this the guy who's so smart we should burn every book until now as a mistake?
The thing is, though, is that you just keep clicking the reset button, right? Like,
and
what
that's
can
true,
build
too.
from postmodern? Nothing.
Right, and that's funny because James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose, who wrote the foremost book on postmodernism so far, and as it relates to the current problem, actually show that some of the like there's like a subfield in the woke stuff that's called Black feminist studies. This is how divided they're even among themselves, and they talk about Foucault and them like they're white supremacists just because they were white postmodernists. They're taking their ideas, but like actually taking them and being like, yeah, but fuck our own heritage.
What I see is that postmodernism, whatever, is that the secular modern world, like, how do you believe in something?
Yeah.
This is why I go back to why I said, like, I want to restart the Stoics and just philosophy in general. It's like, you gotta believe in something. And it's really strange because sometimes, like, you might be wrong about certain things, but that belief system still is important. Like, one of the things I hate about America, generally speaking, or at least when I compare it culturally, is like, how do I don't even know. Like, you have a festival in Sicily, right? All right, it's a little silly. You're celebrating a saint's day or something. But the community gets together. It's like, but it's fun. Ancient Greece. People, they gather. They have dinner, and they're telling myths. Great stories about the gods, right? Modern person plops down, comes at you guys. Do you believe in this? It's like you're missing the point. And it's that human element that
I've
we've
been
lost.
guilty of this as a scientific atheist, probably. And it does bother me that many of them, it is literally believed. It's like the suspension of disbelief becomes, you can't differentiate it between actually believing it. I don't know. But of course, like I said earlier, I'm culturally Catholic. I love Christmas. And I'm not just saying that as like an asshole who's like, yay, presents in the tree. It's like, I told you this earlier, and this was one of the first times I really articulated this, but when I walked around the neighborhood earlier this, or I guess late last year, everyone's got their lights up, Christmas lights and decorations and things, and it's chilly outside, and I'm just walking through. I was like, of course, it's aesthetically pleasing at a proximal level. But it mattered to me that it was a tradition. If I went to and I'm not trying to, it sounds like I'm just picking on something, but the Pride Parade, but just something more contemporary and it's colorful and maybe aesthetically pleasing at a proximal level, it's shallow in the sense that when I looked at this stuff, I was thinking this connects me to people. Brian Greene said this recently. He's an atheist physicist, I believe, but he's Jewish by inheritance. And just traditions, the fact that me looking at this lights and enjoying this, and I'm thinking of, wow, people have been enjoying these lights for a very long time, and it's the first time I thought about it in the sense that I was like, but they're Christmas lights. It's a somewhat modern technology, and I'm like, oh my god, this is actually a modern version of what they probably were putting tinsel up, and it was glinting in the sunlight. And so, in some sense, my enjoyment of these Christmas lights goes back even further and connects me to even older people who were enjoying the glinting tinsel. And then maybe before that, it was some other similar decoration. And even before that, when the decorations were totally different, they were celebrating the same holiday. And it just felt, there's a warmness to that.
Do you know how far back that goes?
I have no idea, and I'm speculating of even the relationship between these two.
In Rome. or I might have my holidays mixed up, but it's a Roman holiday.
Oh.
And that's why, like, you'll see, like, Bible experts will be like, Jesus wasn't born on the 25th of December. He was born in April. Right. But what happened, the 25th of December was a Roman festival. I think it's Lupercalia. Actually, I got to look it up. I got to just quickly know.
Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to point out that, I don't remember in which calendar, but Sir Isaac Newton is born on the 25th of December.
Is he really?
Yeah, in some calendar. I don't know if it's our.
Yeah, but so it's actually kind of sad. The Saturnalia. Okay, it's the Saturnalia.
That's right. Okay, I've heard this.
Yes, but the reason I bring that up, it's kind of sad, but the Saturnalia was a very important Roman holiday that goes back. People don't realize Roman civilization spans like 1,000 years. That's quite impressive. Imagine being America be the superpower for 1,000 years. We're not going to, but
that's like 3 times our current tenure.
Yeah,
twice if you count the colonies.
I always find it amazing because Egypt was like the power. I mean, not a lot of competition for like 3,000 years, which blows my mind. Rome was about like 1,000 years. And then, like, well, I mean, I don't even know who would come next. I mean, I guess like the Brits or America. Okay, but whatever. What I will say, though, is that back to the thing, Saturnalia, I mean, you're going all the way back to the founding of Rome. That's how long this tradition comes.
Yeah, and that's such a crazy feeling to be walking around.
Yeah.
Which doesn't come, it makes it more than just the fact that the lights are pretty. Right? There's enjoyment at that shallow level of, this is a positive stimulus to the human mind to see these colorful lights. It's that connective thing, and it connected in the current times, so that's a connection through time, but it's spatially connected too, because all these different houses had it, and in some ways it brought a neighborliness to it. Oh, I'm like this person, they're like their neighbor, we're all doing something together here, putting out these things for each other to see.
Well, here's something else. It's like time travel, right? Because you're listening to Frank Sinatra, you're listening to old Christmas music.
I've been listening to That's Life a lot. Go on.
Yeah, no, it's really great. Like, because I honestly feel like, I mean, A Christmas Story, you know, it's like, it really brings back, like, the sense of, like, the family. Because, yeah, I'm an agnostic at this point, leaning more towards atheism or just pure, is it deism?
Oh, deism is when you believe in God, but all he did was kick things off, and now he's not intervening. It's like Dominus.
Yeah, I don't even...
Which is related to the God of Spinoza, which is like Spinoza and Einstein, which is like, when they say God, they mean nature. They're just kind of personifying the universe itself with the laws.
To be honest, like, as far as, like, because I used to, as a high schooler, college student, I used to think and really try to define my views on God. And now I feel like that's going to be something that, like, I'll deal with later in my life. If I even try to explore that. Because now I think, like, it just doesn't matter in this moment.
You think it's so related to mortality that...
Yeah, and also just like right now, I think the pressing philosophical question is not God, no God, whatever. It's the good life ethics. Like, this country has a cultural problem. That's like, I need to do my job as an American citizen of the Republic.
On the bright side, aren't a lot of people agreeing on this now, at least that there's a problem? Solutions, widely different and divisive. But that there needs to be some kind of cultural cohesion. I mean, people would love for us to be...
That's why I think it's, I don't know, I think, it's my plan. It requires money. But it truly does, but I would start schools that are just, because the reason I think philosophy is that you get religion out of it. Because that, you're going to lose people. The Catholics can push, but they're a losing battle, because at the end of the day, you know, you can't, God, Jesus, whatever, that's not going to be the model world, you know, in 400 years. It's just not. It might never go away, and that's fine if it stays, because I'm not against Christians.
Scarily, the new ideology of the woke stuff is religious in nature, many have argued, especially Pluckers.
But it's not
theist.
But here's the thing, too. It's not sustainable. 200 years from now? 200 years from now?
200 years of what does woke do?
Yeah, like, you can't, 200 years from now, you can't come and, a woman shouldn't come to me and talk about the glass ceiling in 200 years. If there is, then there is a problem. Like, if we don't have a woman present by 200 years, then something went wrong. But it's going to happen. I mean, Kamala Harris is already VP, and as we push and push...
All she needs is for Biden for Sleepy Joe to get a little too sleepy.
Yeah.
And then we got a female president.
Growing up in New Jersey is so strange, because I feel like I see the future of the country, because it's a very diverse area. But they don't celebrate diversity the way they should. It's everyone. It's the melting pot. Someone told me that we're now a salad bowl, and I want to fucking snap.
That might have been me because I date teachers a lot, and they'll tell me like what's being taught in schools now.
Yeah.
And I'll remember I had a beautiful classical liberal education, and the melting pot. What a beautiful thing, and I loved learning that. And now, first off, they were taking the term too literally anyway. Like, at the end of the day, like, when they said melting pot, it wasn't like, what next? They're going to be like, well, it's a chicken base instead of a beef broth. Like, what the fuck? It's not an actual soup, guys. Like, the point is that we were mixing cultures, but in an unprecedented way, in the sense that we were starting a nation and quickly doing this. But, the claim is that we're going to call. I think they're already doing this in a lot of public schools, teaching, and this gets into the public versus private versus charter versus all these other problems in homeschool. I'm sitting here going like, do I have to homeschool kids if I have them? By the way, me being a dad's a travesty, so why are we even talking about it? But and the idea is that the melting pot implies mixing. Well, that implies cultural appropriation. It implies assimilation.
How?
Assimilation's bad now. And so,
what?
Well, here's why. If it's a salad, then you've got the lettuce and the croutons and stuff, and they're.
That's almost more racist than a melting pot.
Well, what is a salad? It's segregated.
But that's not true.
You don't confuse a crouton
we're gonna
with
thought experiment time. Seriously, if a black man marries a white woman, they're no longer a salad ball. It's mixed. This is also why it's really sad, too.
Well, this is how insane they are, is they would say, no, Ty, if this was a melting pot, they'd both turn halfway brown. But their idea is to steelman. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not capable of steelmanning them right now. But to just not totally strawman them. Their idea of saying that is they have a particular problem with assimilation. I think that's incredibly wrong-headed. But their idea is, look, you and I would agree with a portion of this, which is that we like Chinatown, right? We like the Italian market.
This is how I explain it to Nabil. You ever play Call of Duty?
Yeah.
All right. You have your primary class. And then you have your secondary class.
Mm-hmm.
Your primary class should be
second-class citizens. I got where you're going now.
But your primary class should be America. Your secondary class can be whatever you want. Hell, like you could be Egyptian, this, that. And the only reason I say that is this is what rattles my mind. This is a republic. This is a republic. Like,
well, they'll tell you it's a democracy.
That's why, like, dual citizens. Like, I go back and forth because I could get my dual citizenship from Italy, but then I feel conflicted because it's like, do I believe in this republic? Because if China starts invading Los Angeles, I'm going to go run to Sicily and pretend to be a farmer.
Yeah, I don't like that.
But the reason I bring this up, it's like, I can't.
I wish this was a video podcast already.
I'm writing a time book, as you know.
Yeah, a novel.
And I remember I wrote, like, Asian American, right? And she comes to me, she's like, oh, you got to put a hyphen.
Who says this?
My writing teacher. I'm like, what are you, a hyphen? And she goes like, well, yeah, because... Or she was saying...
You're an insane person. I love this. She's a hyphen.
She goes like, because, her boyfriend's Taiwanese, right?
Okay.
So
the teacher?
Taiwan, yeah.
Okay.
She was actually the hottest teacher that ever taught. She was like 25, whatever. It just sucks. No, because, like, the teacher's coming in. She's about to, like, slap me and be like, oh, you're, like, being, like... You're ignorant. And then she's like 25, basically my age.
Right.
But whatever. Nonetheless, she's like, oh, because like if you're Taiwanese and American, the hyphen goes because you're still Taiwanese. And I thought about this. It's like, look, I'll play games. I'll walk into it. It's like, yeah, I'm Italian. Yeah, no, dude. You bring me to Rome, I'd be like, dude, where's the pizza, please? The McDonald's.
Tyronius Catellis
when I went
from America.
Oh, that's the thing. It's like we can play games, and it's good. I like the diversity, but like at the end of the day, we're Americans.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So you actually said to me once that you would prefer American Italian to Italian American in that sense?
I had a thought. This is just me playing. Sometimes I imagine myself and I go like Americans of Asian descent, Americans of Italian. But the only reason why is I just want America to be the first.
I agree with your analysis. My feeling is that you're like, I hate semantic debates, but not only that, I say that, but then I get into them all the time, so I'm a bullshitter. But I'm now like allergic to language mattering too much because the postmodernists via the post-structuralists are so obsessed with thinking that language is like so important that like a synonym change has like some terrible causal effect on the world. And so for me, it feels a little postmodern, worrying about a hyphen and whatnot. But at the underlying thing that I understand is that the conceptual difference does matter. I don't know if the language does there, but I'm with you that like the American part is the most important part, particularly as pertains to politics.
Well, no, like not just politics. Like I always say, this is like one of the debates I've had, and I'll be like, the Korean man has more in common with the Latino down his street than he does with his uncle in Seoul. Like if he's like first gen, and it's like they don't want to understand that, and it's like I love, because sometimes this is how I feel, and I don't come at it like I feel like I'm four generations in. Like my family's been in New Jersey since like my great grandfather, like before World War One, if you really go back. That's not my point. So as someone from New Jersey, it's like I've been here for a long time. Not me, but there's another thing too. You get the traditions passed down. Because my dad will tell me stories of like the 80s. Nabil, first generation. His father grew up in Pakistan. Like So I had to like integrate Nabil into like the NFL. Like I have to explain like,
awesome.
In the 80s, you know, damn, you know what I mean?
You'd have to integrate me into that right now. Who knows how long my family's been here?
It's crazy. But the reason I bring that up is like,
that's because I'm a nerd American, hyphen or not. That's how.
Because I think when you're here, like 4 generations in, my great grandfather didn't want to teach his kids Italian. I think it's a farce because language, no matter what, is a tool and you should learn it. You should never avoid that because Americans
I think their mistake is if for whatever constraint reason you can only choose one, then of course do the language of the country you're in. If you can do both, do both.
Yeah, learn as many as possible.
Just make sure they have English.
Yeah,
if they're American, but past that, it's good to have more.
Yeah, but the thing is I just see like, look, like let's stop, because people will tell me like, oh, the hyphen. No. 4 generations from now, you come right off the boat from Taiwan, you can buff your chest, I'm Taiwanese. You grow up here, you die here, your children will be like full-blown American. They won't even know Taiwan in 3 generations. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's good if you can keep communications to the motherland, that's fine. You know, diversity of the world is great.
And bring
all I'm saying is your hierarchy of the world.
Bring culture over as far as it aligns with our basic underlying.
Well, that's another thing too, is I can't stand you know what? As an agnostic, I'm going to come swinging for Islam. You know, because one of the things is.
Are you an agnostic or are you atheist?
Like
putting you on the spot here.
I think if you go too far with atheism, you're doing the same issue that like a religious person is. Because like, what do you fucking know? Yeah, you're an atheist. Seriously, it's like you're a full-blown atheist. Like, the Big Bang, what caused that? Oh, well, yeah. No, you don't know.
I think that the way I land on that, we won't waste too much time on this time at least. The way I land on that is because the impetus for such a claim is on the claimant. Mm-hmm. I can say I'm an atheist in the same way. Is it Bertrand Russell who's like, yeah, well, I can say a teapot's orbiting around a planet, but we all assume it's not there, even though what do you know? We didn't go check. That's how I feel about it. I can say I'm an atheist. I can't say that I'm like 100% sure, or that I'm an atheist through falsifying evidence per se. Although that gets a little more complicated too. But we won't spend time on this. But I know what you're saying. So you're making a point about Islam.
Yeah, so Christianity has Greek philosophy mixed into it. One of the things I hate is I believe in the logos, but I believe in the Stoic logos. The
logos changes is the Greek term which logic is derived from. So logos basically means the logical, rational.
Yeah, like this is Ty's version of it. I mean, there's probably the Daily Stoics now on Instagram. I like disagree.
Sure.
But nonetheless, like the easiest, quickest way I could say is like 2 + 2 = 4. That's your logos. It has nothing to do with emotion. It's objective truth that this postmodernists won't accept. Then that's why
I hate to break it to you. There was a controversy recently about 2 + 2 = 5. We could put that. I really wish this was a video.
Are you serious?
I'm not making that up.
Enough. Now here's a business idea. Opportunity cost? Like we have a fucking not even a global pandemic of COVID. How about the planet is like burning, right? Seriously, and you're over here like no. 2 + 2 = 5. Whatever. I leave that to you, scientists. But my point
don't
was
leave us
that, Greek philosophy in religion, right? I guess this is basically what I'm saying. If all the religions are not true, then they can be compared, much like cultures can be compared, right? Despite what some of these lefties will say. But my point is that there is a Greek philosophy built into the New Testament of the Bible, and that tradition comes in.
This is very similar to saying Christmas, and we think of this as a Christian thing, and then you bring it back to Roman Saturnalia. Like, when
Yeah.
people say there's no West, there's no Western tradition, it's like, well, you're just showing
What the hell?
You're showing these roots
Absolutely.
go all the way back. So
Nietzsche, you'll appreciate this as like a scientist. Nietzsche said that like the scientific theory needed devout like Christian thinking. Like you needed like.
Is this where this starts? Because people like Jordan Peterson in the contemporary era, but then also many Republicans, people of the right, really like to somehow connect science to Christianity, if even historically, because I think they're reacting to the sort of new atheist or Richard Dawkins scientific atheism, which takes shots at religions, in particular Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I always have my problems with this claim, but anyway.
I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, it's the tradition, right? Like the Renaissance leads into the Enlightenment. There's some debate there, but nonetheless, it is there. And I think that happens because what is the Renaissance?
And yet the ancient Greeks have the logos absent Christianity, and they're thinking about things they haven't gotten at something quite like modern science. Of course, I'm reading a book now by Steven Weinberg where he highlights the Hellenistic era as being like particularly scientific for the ancient period.
Yeah.
That's called To Explain the World, which is I love that title. But anyway, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. You're trying to make a point.
My main point is just like the reason why with cultures and then religion, it's just they're obviously comparable, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Jordan Peterson says that all the time, but it's true. Is that and when I used to deliver Amazon packages, I listened to his Bible podcast.
Oh, interesting.
And the thing is that stories are powerful, and what's weird is history is really a story. That's why when people say, I hate history, I'm like, yeah, well, the person didn't teach you right. Because they didn't explain the story. They either A, chose a terrible story. Because, like, one of the terrible things that happens is, like, I could make history that's boring. Like, I could choose, I'm not going to choose a geographical area, but I could just, like, the history of fishing. I mean, that might be interesting to someone. But you could go deep. You could dive deep. It could be boring. Here's another one. American history, people find so interesting. It's not. If you do like right after the Reconstruction era, like the Gilded Age, it gets a little boring. So I don't know.
But Ty, how do you feel about herstory?
Herstory?
Herstory.
What is that?
That's the feminists want to do herstory.
Why
is this a video podcast? What am I doing? I've made a terrible mistake in this being audio because your face is fantastic.
What the hell's herstory?
Oh, every time something sounds like man or him in a word, they just...
like the a man and a woman?
Yeah, recently. Who did that? Was that a legislator?
Student? Yeah, kind of, yeah. Like, they brought some asshole in. Like, dude, no, I'm not even kidding. You want to know as a Latin student? Amen. Oh.
Yeah.
It just...
For anyone listening, because this is actually like some of the things we'll make fun of, like 2 + 2 = 5. So far, I'm predicting it will become somewhat popular in like 4 years. But Ben Shapiro has said, and I've said some other things that like the craziest left-wing thing you can find right now in terms of like postmodern wokeism online is like mainstream fighters. But a lot of that stuff is nonetheless somewhat fringe or at least unknown. But this idea that anytime you can find the substring, this isn't computer science terminology, but anytime you can find what looks like the word man or him or something that looks gendered in a word, that you can assume that its root etymologically is in gender, is one of the big problems. Like that's widespread. People here would think that when people here seem to believe that when mankind was said, it was not meant the species Homo sapiens. It was meant just half of it.
I'm about to lose everything, but I gotta say it because I've been thinking.
By the way, intuited that was wrong as a child. As a child, I knew that mankind meant all men and women.
Yeah, that's
just a stupid thing.
This is they're gonna label it sexist, but I'll say it anyway. The thing is women right now. And even me, because, like, even though I'm a man, it doesn't mean that, like, the men before me mean anything to me.
Yes.
Right? So what I mean by that is, like, I come in, and it's like, all right, you built this republic. We're still a superpower about to fall. But nonetheless, it's like, now it's my duty to push it forward.
Yeah.
Right? Because I just believe in civilization and America completely. What I will say about women, too, it's like, no, relax. Like, don't be mad that 10,000 years, like, you haven't had the ability to do that. Push it forward. Stop subtracting. You're destroying.
By the way, I'm going to sound like an asshole, but I'm going to be honest with you. There are some pros to this because, frankly, like, me and Ty have to do something amazing to be remembered, and you just have to do something other people did, and you'll be celebrated for being the first one. Oh, yeah. Like, you and I, right now, like, the number of things, like, like, we would have to, like, genuinely be like, I invented a nuclear fusion reactor.
That's why I think that violates the logo.
I'm being an asshole. I'm joking around a bit, but there's some truth to what I'm saying.
But that's the thing, though, is that
there's a lot of opportunity for you. Yeah,
is that, like, if you go by the logos, then it shouldn't matter your gender.
Yes.
It shouldn't matter your race.
Yes.
And, like, I can.
Well, I get it, and I do get annoyed. The reason I say that is because I do get annoyed by the celebration of, like, faux superlatives. Look. When there's a first female president, yeah, we should celebrate that. We should take note of that. I'm not going to be, quote unquote, colorblind to that completely, in the sense that it's not going to change. I'm going to be colorblind to my decision. I'm not going to vote for someone because I want the first woman president. But when the first woman president comes, I will be like, oh yeah, that's a meaningful thing. All right, like you said, if it doesn't happen within 200 years, maybe there is a problem.
Do we remember the first, like we do, but do we remember the first slave emperor of Rome? I mean, the first plebeian
is that Marcus
consul
Aurelius?
Of Rome?
Like, who is this? What's going on?
No, his name escapes me. I think it starts with an H. It's like, it really sucks because he dies. Like, I'm not. I don't. What I will say is it was a short ass reign. He died like literally a couple of weeks. But people like the Stoics later would make him out to be like virtuous because sometimes killing yourself as an emperor was seen. I'm not even getting into that. I got to look up the history because I'm really mushy on it. What I will say is this. What were we just saying about women becoming president?
It's just superlatives, but just basically.
Oh, if I became president, technically speaking, I'm the first Italian, I put quotation marks. Don't ever fucking say that because that just belittles me. That's my opinion. Like I don't like who.
You're not resting on the laurels of that. You're trying to make your name by policy, take
Obama. Like people shouldn't be first black president. Yeah, it's true. It's a fact. What does it say about him? What did he do? And I'm not saying I'm for or against. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I would say this. Recognize the superlatives. Don't be making them up. Like when they're like, Kamala Harris was the first and they're like listing like 80.
She's actually not the first colored vice president.
I didn't know. There was a Native American. Yeah. Whose VP was that?
Oh, I just read the article.
It's such a surprising thing that we had a Native American
World
VP.
War One? It was like a famous president.
By the way, we've been going 2 hours. Can we keep going? I'm happy to keep going long. I like
I don't care.
I am going to pee.
Well, good. I just lost my law career, but...
Yeah, that's right. And we're back. We're like a radio show now. Maybe I'll put a little interstitial. Maybe it'll be like...
Yeah, like a nice little song.
Yeah.
All right, I thought about this. I want to tell... this is controversial, but... So one of the biggest debates I had recently... is so we're talking about Amsterdam, whatever, and that sex workers can have like a career.
Okay. What do you mean? They're just allowed to be
like almost like all right, sex workers legal, whatever, but they wanted it to be like a fulfilling career, like almost to the equivalent. Like the argument implied that almost like when kids go to pick their career, it's like I'm going to be a sex worker. I swear to God. I swear. This is just in a group of like my law friends. It's my law friend's girlfriend.
Okay.
And I said, no, like, I'm sorry. Look, I don't care. You want to do that, that's fine. But do not pretend that it's, like, some fulfilling career. And then, like, we got into it. And basically, I actually took a feminist, like, women's history of France, believe it or not.
You're talking about her history?
Yeah, basically. That's basically what I took. And in it, one of the main feminists says, because this is, the French came up with this idea of, like, the separate... I always struggle with this word. Spheres? Yes, thank you. Spheres. And basically...
you just had a talk with the god you're agnostic towards.
Yeah, I was like, what? Please? Women would run the house and men would, like, go out. It's like, this is the castle. They'll keep it clean, whatever. And obviously, we don't believe in that, like, modern day. But what I will say, so she says there's this idea that, like, if women want to reach... If they want to, like, develop... I guess like true feminism where it's like they rise to power almost. They have to leave like the safe zone. They have to almost go out, almost like the hero's journey. Go out into chaos and like embrace like turmoil or just life, whatever. nonetheless, this was my point. Especially, remember the logos we were talking about before? So I started arguing with them. They got mad at me, but I was like, no, because if you're doing sex work, right, you're almost violating your logos in a sense. It's like, I am not capable of doing like a higher end job. And I don't know. I got into the weeds of it. Obviously, there's I think the problem is you do that for economic reasons.
Yeah.
Whatever. But then to pretend it's a fulfilling career. I mean, you know, like people, like it's a common theme. It's like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life that I'm going to be okay with, that like I'll be happy with? And like sex work, it's like I don't know. It just struck me wrong, but
wouldn't suggest it. Yeah.
Well, I got them because I was like, you want your daughter doing that?
Right.
Because they were.
Which is such a common sense argument. Common sense arguments are not common.
No, it's not.
Now, like from a libertarian perspective, I don't think it should be illegal. I think it should be someone can sell their body if they want. But to then pretend, it's a different thing to then advocate or pretend that it's like.
The thing is, like, female woman walks in and there's like a sex worker there. Like, she can't be like, oh, well, my career is just as fulfilling as yours. It's like.
I love that you have to say female woman now. You're like, I'm just so we're clear. This is a person with a vagina who wants to be called she.
I don't know. I guess I'm more conservative in this sense because, like, I'm not, because they tried to argue me. It's like, well, sex is like, because I guess I think of like a productive human standpoint, and they were arguing that like sex is this, like you're doing a service to like the Republic, I guess. I don't know. You gotta watch.
You're certainly providing a service. I'll say that.
Yeah, you really gotta watch.
And I don't mind being serviced every once in a while, Ty.
I don't know. If you watch, you have to watch Blade Runner. But I will say this, to maintain the conversation, is men are really isolated here. There's a lot of like prostitution and hologram women, which you will see.
Yeah.
And it's very lonely. And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I studied the ancient Romans. Prostitution was everywhere. We find graffiti in Latin. This is great. It's like blowjobs, like 50 cents, like whatever their equivalent is. Like that's what's coming through in the archaeology.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I just felt like, actually, I think that's maybe why I disagree with this, because I feel like that's an ancient job.
Oh, wow.
And I think that, no. It's, if we're really going to be serious about this, like, higher career things.
Interesting.
But
I feel like, if,
well, actually,
the libertarian market part of me says, look, if there's supply and there's
demand. Won't be libertarian? Let's talk. It's an
Okay.
honest question. You want Manhattan to have prostitution? Because I debate this against it through and through.
I don't know.
Because I don't want NYU students doing this. I think it's just. I don't like.
Look, I prefer, my point is just kind of freedom of association and property.
Mm-hmm.
My body's my property. Association's up to me. If I can, you and I can make a deal that I touch your elbow and you give me and I give you $10 for that. You know what I mean? So like for me, it's just like I wouldn't advise someone go into sex work like that. It feels wrong to me to not let Ty Catello sell his body.
I don't know. What's strange is I lost religion, but sex is still something I like meander with.
Well, and that's because sex is actually with the denial of human nature and all that.
Mm-hmm.
You will, I think, even hear people say things or express sentiments like the obsession with sex and the conflict surrounding it is due to the historical accident of Christianity or something like that. And sex is so fundamental to evolution in a sexual species, of course, that this is an absurdity on its face to anyone who's scientifically literate, because, or I guess evolutionarily literate. It's not going to help you if you're a chemist, but sex, it is an actual facet of nature that sex is a contentious topic. It's not an artifact of religion. In fact, it explains why religion is so worried about it, because because anyone would be worried about it, whether it was religious, philosophical, whatever angle you came from.
But why are they worried about it?
Because this is how your genes make it to the next generation, and that is how we're built. And so that's
not the case anymore.
It is.
Is it though? Because with modern, I guess,
two problems. One, imagining it wasn't the case starting today doesn't matter because we are built by that process over the
Okay, that's
epochs. But the second part is it is still happening. I mean, it doesn't mean that the same things are being selected. Our environment has changed drastically, but we're still evolving. Slowly as always, but we're still evolving. We don't have a science that can predict where. I have heard of some kind of microevolutionary biologists who claim to be able to track that some traits are being selected for, and they have some way of trying to.
I don't think we are evolving, because what person's not having kids and getting married?
We're having fewer kids now.
Fewer.
Not that this should matter, but
fewer, but they still go into the next generation.
So fewer matters because
this is what I'll say. This is what I always say to like me and Nabil talk about with history. It's like arranged marriage ensured that like everyone would basically get into the next generation pool, well, unless you died of disease or something.
So one problem with this is that it is in the long term, it is a statistical phenomenon. So it's not as though all that matters is to have one kid or not. If you have 3 and I have 1, then the prediction a priori, it doesn't necessarily need to be true, is that if I go 1,000 years, the further I go into the future, the more likely I'm going to have Ty and not Steve. Because, well, why did he only have 1 and he had 3? And then if a plague happens or COVID happens, does my one kid die and 2 of yours die, but you have 1 to keep going?
So let's take that then.
So it is statistical.
Wouldn't you want a family structure? Because in this modern world, if you had, I mean, as Americans, we know with these millennials and stuff that like marriages aren't rock solid. But if you had a rock solid marriage, you had a good job, theoretically you could have 5 kids, 6. I mean, Jesus, wow. But yeah, like you could try to pop these out.
Mm-hmm. Well, two things. One, just to not let the evolutionary thing get away. Nothing stops evolution. In theory, you could stop it. It'd be a serious undertaking, but like as a thought experiment in principle, if you had the right technology, you could technically stop it. But generally speaking, there is selection, like what you're talking about. I disagree that everyone's genes today are equally getting into the future. I still think there's a competition there, but nonetheless, forgetting that part of it, the more important part of evolution in some sense is the mutations, and those happen pseudo randomly. So,
okay,
you know,
well, let's get back to
your
sex.
point.
Yeah, I just because like one of the things I make fun of all the time is like sex, something so powerful it causes a sleepover for the rest of your life. In the sense that like people mate.
That is really funny. I like that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just don't. I think it's part of that like you really should watch it because I just think it's like that future society. The Romans had it. They did. I mean, with all this stuff. But once again, it was mostly from the male point of view, right? Men could go out. They'd go sleep with the lupi. Which, by the way, fun fact about Latin, lupi is wolf in Latin. It's also whore. Very strange. Yeah, they think it comes from because like the she wolf.
Yeah.
So, but nonetheless, like they would go out and bang prostitutes and come home to their wife and kids, like nothing ever happened.
So the reason for this ultimately is that women don't have to pay for sex, ever. There's always someone. I mean, on average, again, this isn't.
Wow, yeah. There's always a desperate guy, as Nabil says, but yes.
Yeah, there's and men have a arguably a larger appetite anyway. It's shown that they're higher in interest in sexual variety. Likely more interested in strange sex because sex is very dangerous for women at an evolutionary level because if you get saddled with a pregnancy, that's a big problem. So if you get the wrong baby in you, a subprime baby, you might say, that could be an issue for you. Men, if you get a subprime mate, whatever, the kid might survive or not, I'm leaving. That's a little bit of more probability for my fitness to get into the future.
Would you rather have high quality offspring that sets up for the next generation or no?
And that's the theory of sexual selection, and both sexes are certainly doing that in humans. But women are doing it more, A. B, the reason for that is Trivers' paternal investment theory, which is that there is this fundamental asymmetry. Because women are saddled with the pregnancy, they can't get away from it. There's less incentive to have multiple sexual partners because you can only get pregnant by one of them at a time.
All right. Well, how about this? Let's do.
And so just to type on that, when you, for the man, yes, he is choosing for his main, which is often his only, mate, the one he's going to pairwise bond with and really try to put resources in and raise this child with the woman. All of that is naturally evolved in, but there are tertiary strategies like spread your seed around even to subprime mates, but that's not the one you're going to settle down and put your resources on. That's kind of a redundancy plan. Hey, maybe that'll help me get my genes of the future too. The male is a little choosy with who he's going to.
I see. Well, how about this? The divorce rate is 50%.
Okay.
From a historical aspect, I think it's of two things. Obviously, now women can divorce.
That helps.
Yeah, and B, I also think the sexual revolution has something to do with that.
Right, yeah.
The Me Too movement has now come. So where do you... like prostitution, I just don't think... I think it brings society down. Don't we need more ethical citizens of the Republic?
I wouldn't want to hand-wring about it too much myself, but I haven't put a lot of thought into it. I still come back to basic freedoms and say, even if I agree with you, the only way I can do that is not through law because it's not my property. It's not for me to say she can't do. It's not hurting anybody, literally, in the sense of like infringing on her rights. I'm actually infringing on hers by not letting her do it if she wants to do it. Notwithstanding, I wouldn't suggest it. I wouldn't want my daughter to do all these things I'm agreeing with you on. It's just I feel like the way to get that is that we have to convince people, if we want to. I don't really care. But you would have to convince people of a better life. But I don't think you're...
Here's a libertarian question for you, though.
Okay.
Zoning.
What do you mean by zoning?
Zoning. In the sense that, like, all right, it's your right to have prostitute. Where are you putting this? Because this is actually something libertarians don't really talk about. It's like, oh, freedom, freedom, freedom. Like, where's the red light district? Where are we putting this?
Well, we don't... to the degree that you can... I'm not sure what...
Basically, I'm saying it's like, okay, yeah, it's freedom, 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 but...
Yeah.
It's still... there's a reason Times Square has blinding lights now, like of advertisements. It's because it used to be where all the prostitutes and drugs were. My main point is what I'm saying is that, all right, you have this fundamental freedom, let's say where you would allow it.
Yeah.
Where is it going? Because it's still going to be harmful, I think.
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't put any thought into laws around zoning and whatnot. Like, for me, again, just with a basic naive libertarian thing, it's like, if I want to, sell something out of my house, I should be able to. But
I think the reason I push against libertarianism is that individualism is good, but sometimes you need like a group to accomplish better things. Like that's the thing. America's so individualistic that like there's not really a common ethos or ethic like going around. I think that's why we're philosophically unstable.
Yeah. So I'm not like big L libertarian person. I have small L libertarian, I think, innately.
Yeah, we probably have
particularly as relates to like the founding fathers' vision. I see that as like the ultimate libertarian, and that does not graft perfectly with all with like a modern nerd you'll meet who's libertarian.
The problem is the founding fathers, their view, we would not be the superpower we are today. They didn't even want a navy. These anti-federalists.
Yeah, and I actually have a lot of isolationist sympathies, and people get mad at me.
How dare you? That's an infamia.
Well, it's a what?
Infamia.
What is this?
If you watch The Godfather, well, actually, it's the latest scene. It's Italian for like, oh man, what's the exact definition? I just look like terrible bad. I'll get the precise.
Well, you know more about history and politics than me. Make the case against that.
Well, I'll tell you a scene actually in my book, just real fast.
Okay.
It's the final
world
battle.
Exclusive.
Yeah, a little exclusive because it's in here for people like you. Seriously. Okay. So it's a time book, and obviously because of that, you have...
I love that you say it's a time book, like someone would say timepiece, like a lot. Yeah, like it's a time book. You got time books.
Like time travel specifically. And in this scene, it's like the final battle, and the thing is, because there's time travel, you can have armies from various different eras. So what I have is, because as a classical person, I see Christians as destroying a lot of my beautiful classical history.
Okay.
So you have a medieval army that would slaughter the legions, right? and they're outside Rome, okay? And they're at the gates of Rome, and it's a huge medieval army. And the thing about medieval army is they were heavy cavalry. The Romans, they were like, you can picture legionnaire, shield, sword. They didn't have horses, really. Those were auxiliary troops. That's actually why they start losing in the Middle East, because cavalry becomes more important in the Middle Ages.
Is cavalry and cavalier etymologically related, or are they just different?
Well, yeah, I think, I don't know military history but a cavalier, I think, is a type of cavalry. I'll have to look that up.
Okay.
So here it is. So what happens is you have 8 Americans at this point, because they all regrouped in Rome, and it's an Indian American, right? Okay. And she's right next to the General Marcus, who's like a typical legionnaire. So they come out of the gates and they see this huge ass army surrounding Rome. They're about to get their asses kicked.
So you said Indian
American. She's an American.
Okay.
She's Indian descent.
Okay.
Just so you picture whatever.
Okay.
So she goes like you got to get your army and you have to get back into the walls of Rome. And then Marcus goes like, "Oh, sweet American girl, it's like the world has not come to know the name of Rome by hiding behind these walls." And he orders to march forward. That's the thing. Isolating America? We're nothing. We're a joke. We beat Switzerland in the Alps.
So for me, I don't mean by it, to the degree that I sympathize, I don't mean that we have no foreign relations. I don't mean that I mean more just at a softer level of nation building, being like occupying in that way. But also, how do you stand with just having occupations, but also things like embassies? How does that stuff work? How do embassies come about?
Embassies is
the countries have.
It's more like a modern just work of diplomacy. I don't really know that, but if we talk about U.S. bases and stuff, I gotta tell you, I'm almost hurt a little bit when the liberals act like America. You'll always hear this, they got involved with Latin America. It's yeah, you're about to go communist. Scratch that. My main point is they want to say America is America's evil. It's no, you have a very stable global world, right? It's actually kind of sad, I think, because it's when Europeans hate on Americans, I get, this might be my nationalistic bias, but this is how I feel. We spend so much fucking money on the military, on giving aid to these foreign countries, almost to keep the globe stable, just to keep us moving forward. When we could have took that money and built a space station, a hyperloop, a train. And I just feel people are coming at America when we were on top. When we got the atom bomb before the Soviets, we didn't conquer the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just think that I don't think that they're fair. Isolation.
There's an obvious, if nothing else, relative ethical goodness of America versus many other countries.
The thing is, when you're on top, you're on top.
And they'll cherry pick things that we've absolutely done that are bad.
You can't be the. I'm not even going to say alpha. I'll just quote Peterson. It's a true, I don't want to make it a man ethos, a civilization, but in order to be the top civilization, you can't be Mr. Nice Guy. Mm-hmm. And I think we get stepped on a little bit too much, especially now. China is making us look foolish because they don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. I just don't think people are as fair to this because I really do.
How do you feel about the world police criticism?
Criticism in what way? We shouldn't?
People say America shouldn't be the world's police.
I have some sympathies, but then what? Because then we lose our influence.
Do we? Is that how we get influence? Because it seems to me, and I could be naive, but it seems like we have that soft influence of
money,
but also just look, it's working over here. People vote with their feet by moving here, but they also vote with their culture by copying us where they stand. They go, yeah, we're going to wear blue jeans over here.
Yeah, but that's not our power. Our power really is, here's $1 million. Listen to us. There's a reason why this COVID thing, most of it's foreign aid. That's really why. It's actually we really don't need a military anymore. It's we're just bribing people to listen to us. Seriously, that's just basically what we're doing.
And yet, if we're a nation of ideas, like we talked about earlier, isn't it powerful that we are sometimes able to, and I could be naive here, but it seems like by pure dint of voting with their culture, affect people elsewhere without bribing them, without going there and purposefully doing it, but people just saying, I want that culture here.
Yeah, but now I will you this about the woke movement. Our culture's depleting.
And that's still exporting. So people have complained about this, like Douglas Murray, I mentioned him earlier. He's talking about, and a few others, Konstantin Christen, and I forget the other gentleman's name, but they have a podcast called Trigonometry. It's funny. But they're talking about, like, now particularly other Western nations, because they often do import our culture for one reason or another, for better or worse, often thought of for better. Here, they're importing the woke stuff. And they talked about how, like, in England, you have BLM protests, which makes no sense because it's based on a history that has nothing to do with. It's that criticism of, like, how are you going to import a history? Like one of them joked, like, what are, like, is someone saying the English cops are beating black people? Like, that's an American complaint about American policing. Why are they marching over there? And they would say, well, we're in solidarity with our brothers in that country, and okay, but it does seem like it seems to me like the Americans are LARPing as civil rights people when they're not. It's just not our era, it's not our fight. In fact, our parents won that fight. And then the other, like the English and other places, are LARPing as us, who are LARPing as our parents. And it's like, is anyone genuinely rising to the challenge of their time, or are they all playing dress up as though they're in a time they read about in school or something?
This is why I like history, because I don't think you can know the problems of your time unless you know the landscape.
Well, what do you mean by landscape?
It's just like, I'm a visual person, so like I can imagine, like I literally can, like, I see it almost like a long. Do you ever play Halo? Maybe that's not the best explanation. Like I picture like almost like visually the civilization as it goes along.
Okay.
Like
timeline.
Yeah, but the timeline isn't like numbers. It's like I visually see like a city or like just like the time period.
Yeah, architecture's changing. Culture's
exactly,
changing.
Exactly. And my point is like that's why like I want to do like the Minds of Z show, because I realized
I'm getting all the exclusives on this podcast.
Yeah, the reason why is like I realize it's really crazy. 10 years, I'm 30. Just like it's just really people don't think about this. Like everyone party, good time. Oh yeah, it's nice Instagram. No. Like I'm sitting home like. This is temporary.
You're dying right now.
And the most amazing thing, go to your father. Say, hey, Dad, you got like a video of yourself? No. But now with this, you could don't think you're going to be 50 and you're going to be able to look up videos of yourself at this age. That's never been done in the history of man. Right? With the live photo now, it looks like Harry Potter. It's like a photo and it's live.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring this all up is like, one of the things about the show would be a time capsule. And also COVID, like now I realize this is an event. But also the woke movement's an event. I like see it. The only thing is I'm not as optimistic as where it's going.
I'm not as optimistic at all about that. And I'm increasingly less. But I love all these projects though, and you're helping pull me out of the doldrums. Because I've been depressed for at least 6 months. But it's been a slow burn for a couple of years. But I love that, because I've always been someone who wants to work on, and this is why I kind of disagree with something you said earlier about wanting to do a Catholic, almost hierarchical organization of philosophy, in the sense that I like the Protestantization in the sense that I'm a guy unaffiliated with the university, and many are affiliated, but I'm sitting at home writing about whatever topic I want. I published a blog about criticizing
multiverse. Why does
multiverse.
Protestantism work? What happens? It branches off. You go to baptism. You go to what are they? The evangelicals.
But I just
Mormonism.
But I just mean in the sense that the founder meant when they said like, you're going to read the source material and work through the philosophy and think for yourself and produce new work.
Yeah.
And so.
But why can't you all right? Theoretically, you're copying. We'll just copy paste Catholicism and just make at the core of it some Stoic philosophy. It would still work because honestly, the Catholic dogma, despite this new pope who really is changing shit up, it really should be stable if it's correct. The thing about philosophy is like, look, you don't agree with it, that's fine. You see, the problem with Catholicism is based on religion, and religion is based on like what's the right word for it? I don't even know, just religion.
But philosophy of science takes a different view because the scientific method says because there's no revealed truth, because we're not certain of anything, everything is subject to change to some degree, but it's not the same degree. Certain things have been so well evidenced that while we always leave the door open, we'd be shocked if Einstein was wrong about certain things. He's obviously not fully correct, and neither was Newton, but But there are things that Newton was correct about that he remains correct about.
Well, one of the things I thought about, because literally imagine like this school almost is like, instead of like the Stoics, is like you choose a color that describes your philosophy. How about this? Like I would train kids, high schoolers, when you're writing a paper, you're arguing with someone else. 'Cause that's when you really learn how to write. And that they learn like rhetoric, they learn the tradition of the past. And like and
that's a very legal,
yeah,
but also philosophical, because of course.
Yeah, I also think Stoic philosophy.
Are...
Honestly, Stoic philosophy is the perfect judge. If you really take, and the thing is too, is like, I would take.
Maybe
Stoic
we should take
philosophy.
a minute to explain Stoicism. I don't know if we've done that.
Yeah, it's a little murky because I haven't dived like so deep into it. 'Cause I feel because like there's PhDs on it, but they treat it more as like a history book. Obviously, you'll hear the phrase like, "Oh, he's Stoic." It's almost an insult.
Colloquially, it's like he's kind of straight-faced, almost brooding.
But it's really kind of like controlling your emotions in that logos, that logic, and focusing on that to like make decisions. And there's other aspects to it, courage and all this.
One of the big cores to that is accepting that there are things you can't control and not trying to. Don't dwell on it.
Right.
Because that's where pathos gets out of hand. Your emotions are spinning a wheel at no ends. But, like you're saying about logos, determine those things you can change and then work on changing them correctly. I just read an article on Stoicism on Quillette. I forgot who wrote it, but it was something like The Wisdom of a Slave, because Epictetus was a slave. It's interesting to me that you and Nabil really took to Stoicism in particular.
I just think it's...
My mother naturally has always liked Stoicism. She didn't know that's what it was called, but...
Yeah, I just think for some reason because when I study history, the reason I like history so much is like I don't see it as just a story. I see them as tools. Like I'm like I can take this and do
It's
this.
a philosophical view of history.
Yeah, and it just like I love like every time I learn something, it's like all right, I can take this and do that. Like you can copy paste or just morph it. And
well, this is why I love you, and this is when I first met you, or coming home and I'm talking to Jake. Very rarely do I meet someone who has a working knowledge as opposed to like just trivia. Like, oh yeah, I can tell you all sorts of random facts, and like to them history is just like remembering dates or something. But a truly philosophical mind, and this is true of scientists too. Like most scientists, in my opinion, aren't scientists in the sense that you have to understand the underlying philosophy of science that justifies what you're even doing in that lab. And they'll actually, disrespect that. And so this idea that you're actually going to learn from, like, it reminds me of, and you read Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Mm-hmm. I'm reading The World Until Yesterday, but a book of his that I really want to read, he wrote it with someone else as a co-author, is called Natural Experiments in History. And he's saying history is a science, and it's useful, its results are useful. I would say this is more often understood by conservatives in the sense that, and that might be because they're traditionally, because they look back and progressives tend to look forward. Progressives might say, oh, this is a good idea, this is a good idea. And then a conservative or someone who knows their history goes, but somebody sounded an awful lot like you, and then this terrible thing happened.
Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, I saw a meme, because you've heard it before, like those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And the meme was, those who study history are doomed to watch others repeat it. And it really is true. That's the big thing, too, is like socialism stuff. It's like...
Well, this is where it's largely that argument is used, at least contemporarily.
Yeah.
Is communism, socialism, Marxism.
But
it's a general principle, and you look at it and say, and this is the thing, this is the synthetic mind. Like, you actually are synthesizing a working knowledge. And that's the other thing. Like, you didn't have to look up Wikipedia on your phone and show it to me. You said, we're having an argument. And it was also interesting because we come from different interests and intellectual traditions and stuff. But so, like, I would make a point, and we're first principles thinkers. It also goes along with it. So I would make a point from biology. You would make a point from history or Rome or something. And you're coming at it from different angles, but we're both able to bring a working knowledge to a problem and synthesize our own argument. Most people can only repeat other stuff. I don't mean to sound like an asshole, but like that's what you find is regurgitation, right? As though like some titans created the knowledge before us, and we're just doomed to just repeat what they're saying rather than you
Yeah.
can make a contribution to knowledge, make an argument, think, right, and that I loved about you because, and especially it's interesting too that you come from a different place and do it. Because it's less competitive, so we don't get into a dick wagging contest because it's not like who's the better physicist. It's like, well, there's a level of seeding ground of like, well, you know more about well, you know more about history. So I think that helps too because with young men, ego can get into the mix, and I don't always get along with people who have similar interests too close because of that. But we're also just not those kinds of people. We're interested in ideas and in thinking and synthesizing new ideas rather than just being like, I don't know. I didn't like math students and physics students a lot of the time because they're just a competitive.
I've dealt with that too because like with history too, with the trivia for example, like maybe I'm making a point to you and I got like the emperor wrong and they'll correct me mid thing and it just happens to me all the time. I go like all the same.
Right, because you're like...
It's not the noun, it's not the name, it's the concept.
And there's nothing impressive about what you just did, but I was making a point that could be a contribution to knowledge. It could change someone's opinion. It could...
And one of the things, like, people ask me, like, why Rome? And I always say, because that's the only other, like, long-lasting republic we have. We have Venice, generally.
I didn't know that was a distinct republic.
Yeah, that's actually why I bought the Venice book, because I'm thinking for the time book, I don't know if I need to bring Venice in, because it's the only other republic, really.
We went to Sanctuary Books earlier in Haddonfield. Love that little bookshop.
Yeah, it was really nice.
And, I didn't pick up anything this time, but...
Yeah, but that's what, because, like, you really, honestly, like, I can analogize a lot of situations. So, like, Rome had the struggle of the orders. That's what they call it. You ever heard the phrase plebs?
Yeah.
So there were castes. It was like you're a patrician, you're a pleb. And it was so bad that like there were 2 consuls, so almost 2 presidents, that's just the quickest way I can explain to you, in Rome, that they had to say, all right, one has to be a plebeian. It's actually equivalent of us saying, like if we have 2 presidents, like one has to be black. I mean, that's just the crazy, but that's literally what it was like. But then what happens is...
A little bit, starting to get a little more evidence towards maybe some kind of racism in the ancient time. Okay.
But the thing is, though, is that you can't really tell. Yeah, also, this one's great. You want to talk about, like, I could adopt you. So I'm a patrician, you're a pleb. I could adopt you, you're now a patrician. There's ways around it.
Right.
And you know what's funny? Oh, get ready. This one's bad for affirmative action. It gets so bad in the ancient world, like because you could have 2 plebeians, but you can only have 1 patrician. That way later, we're talking 100 years later after this, there's patricians trying to become plebs in order to become consul. But the reason I bring this up is it's the struggle of the orders, because what happens is 100 years, no one gives a fuck at a certain point. It's like, oh, okay, that's great. Well, we conquered Gaul all the same. Like, no one ends up caring about that. And I look to that as hope that I truly believe in 100 years, 200 years, the racing will matter because Pakistanis, Egyptians, like I'm just listing my own friends, Hispanics, it's like they've been in the country for 4 generations. They don't even care anymore.
I can see these different, like, whatever the future version of the counterfactual is. I can see these timelines. My fear is that, like, let's just look at the data. Like, who are the people who are making race a big deal and who are blah? It's not first generation. It's like the wealthiest, most assimilated people. Like it's most often white, but certainly like upper middle class to upper class college students with money, and it's our friends. It's not people from the slums. They're getting woke now through the media and stuff, but like that's the thing. It's like it counterintuitively, it's the people who are most well off trying to become victims.
After studying history, what I can say, and this is why I really go at it, it's an economic issue. Post World War II, you have the GI Bill. This is how the boomers got through college for nothing. It excluded black people. Post World War II. The thing about World War II is America as we know it, we love the founders, and that's great. America as we know it after World War II. Before then, America's a different country, and that's undeniable. Suburbs, right? To get a mortgage, black people were excluded. 1980s, CIA coming in, they're going against crack as opposed to cocaine. We've damaged that community. And I don't say we as an Italian, I say it as, look, the Republic damaged this community.
Yeah.
And I see it as an economic issue. But here's the thing, reparations we're talking about, it can't be a long-lasting thing. It needs to be like maybe like one bill for 15 years. But then the thing is, though, is education requires 3 people. It requires the parents, the student, and the teacher. And all 3 suck in public education, depending on. That's why Asian Americans, right? You have a culture of discipline. Generally, I mean, I'm not Asian. I don't know what goes on in the house. I'm just going like that's just what I see. The work ethic. Okay. You have the student. The student obviously has to try, and then the teacher itself.
Similar with Jews. It's argued, especially.
Yeah, the Jews are the same way. Why? The Jews are great lawyers. Why? Because it's the same cultural. The thing about culture is individuality, in my personal estimation, only works with culture. And let me explain what I mean. Government can't come and tell you, do your home. Like, maybe that's the best example. Culture's like if you're building a couch, maybe this is like the best way I can think of it. Government's like the hardwood, the shape. But culture's the soft pillow, and then you sit on it. Culture you need for like the smoothing out of like the interactions between humans, because the government can't be in every coffee shop making sure that people are like, hello, how are you?
What is your pronouns?
Well, that's that's another thing.
The government is doing that in
Let me ask
Canada.
you. I gotta ask you because like I'm on the fence, and Abram got upset with me. But if someone asked me like what your pronouns is, I would get angry, and the reason why is like, it's like. I don't know. Isn't it offensive? Because it's like you don't think I'm a man, and I'm not trying to come at it as toxic masculinity. It's more like I don't know.
I would think it was silly.
Would you answer?
I would answer. You know me. I would answer in a way where I would be like, "Look, if I was in a jovial mood and I just wanted to get it over with, I'd be like, take a guess." If I was in a more common mood, I'd be like, well, actually, the postmodernists in the 60s, I would be like, you're in a cult. But no, would I go, he and him? No, I wouldn't answer the way they want. Because I'm not letting that become the norm. I'm not participating in this insanity. Like, and again, now it sounds, people are going to say that it sounds like I'm saying, no. Caitlyn Jenner walks up to me, she... Okay, Caitlyn, she.
Well, that's the thing. But But the thing is, if you saw Caitlyn Jenner, you would instantly just say she.
That's the other thing. But I'm sympathetic. Look, even if let's take another example. Someone walks up to me, they haven't, and they have no intention to go through any kind of surgery or whatever, and they just say, I identify this way. Would you call me she? But it's like totally looks like clearly as a man. I'm okay doing that. Especially since I am not asking them. They're gonna have to tell me. They have to take that initiative.
I would just avoid using the pronoun.
Well, that's what I do when it's they them. I'm not saying that. Mm-hmm. I have done it before for someone. I don't think I ever will again. But in that case, if they go, I don't want he or she. I'm going. I'm just using your name.
This is a bigger problem than people want to let on because, like, look, I struggle with names already.
Yeah.
Pronouns are such a I don't even think when I'm saying it. It's just so part of grammar.
Right. Not just grammar. Natural. You're wired to recognize accurately someone's sex, and it works almost every time. Sorry. I don't know where to go from there, but it's like. At some point, it's just so asinine that, at some point, am I supposed to be like, how many times, this is a 3-hour conversation already. We've been talking about all sorts of topics. How many times could I have interrupted you and been like, hey, Ty, before we go on, just to make sure, can we both agree this is a table?
Well, that's the thing.
And then it's like, is that a cup? And are we recording? And do we both agree that we're recording? You mentioned opportunity costs earlier. It's one of my favorite concepts. Comes from economics. Widely applicable throughout philosophy. Not always understood that that's the case, but it's certainly not something that's in the common knowledge. This should be taught in K through 12 to people because this tool says economics is about finite resources, which means you have to make decisions you have to create systems that decide where those finite resources go, and you have to have, and you as an individual have to make decisions on how to spend those resources. Opportunity cost says, everything's an economy. Forget money for a minute. When you and I doing this podcast, we did by foregoing infinitely other things we could have been doing. We could have been baking cookies. We could have been eating. We could have been running for president. All sorts of things. And we said, no, this is the thing we're going to do. And this goes back to stoicism of make smart decisions. It's maybe you should try, don't be too hard on yourself, but try to make sure that whatever you're doing, there isn't too many things that you should be doing instead, because again, you're doing whatever you're doing at the cost of Like when you lay on the couch and just watch TV all day, you're doing that. That's a day you never get back is the point. It really comes from the fact that you're going to die. But
yeah, it is amazing. But now, like with leisure, the thing is like I feel like our generation, just in general, like I think phones, I think are the most dangerous thing because like I think
old man Ty.
Yeah, like if there was no TV and there was no phones, I would probably be reading nonstop. And I'm not even, and I'm just being honest. And the only reason why is I would need stimulation. Oh, thank you. You know what? Because that would be it. That's all we would have.
Yeah. I would probably read some more without the phone. I do not fall into the TV trap too much, happily. And
it's a common. Like I don't watch TV either. It's a common theme among millennials and Gen Z.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean streaming service too. I don't too much.
Yeah, I hate shows because wow. I hate sitting down.
Cobra Kai is fucking awesome.
The Bill insults me, but I always get like a little depressed after watching. Like I don't know if you noticed, but like after Hamilton, like I had to like.
Yeah, dude, it was weird. I was like, so we watched Hamilton. It's fucking a long play, and you were like on your phone, like despondent for like an hour. I was like, is he alright?
Not an hour.
Dude, at least. And I would be like, hey, trying to strike up a conversation. Be like, yo, Ty, what's up? And you'd be like, does anything matter? No, he was but you're just looking at your phone.
I think I just feel like so much time.
You were macking some lady though, I'm sure.
That's true. Also, it is. I can't multitask. So like, if you were talking to me, there are times where I don't.
And many people have remarked on like the social problem with phones that like I'll be talking to my brother. I'm not gonna say which one. That's how I'll save them. But I'll be talking to my brother, and then like we've been talking. I was polite and listened to his side, and now it's my turn to talk. And the whole time he's on his phone, and I'm like, well, I just listened to you, and I'm responding to you, and you're just like nodding, looking at the phone.
Yeah.
That's like, and then they come back and pretend they heard you, and you're like, ugh. Like,
my mom does that. I know I can't do that. That's why, like, if I'm like texting, I try to do it so quick. I'm like, yeah, and I'm like trying to, because I can't multitask.
But it's never quick in the outside world. People think they're like shooting a text, and I'm like, Jake, you've been texting. Like, we're in a conversation, you say, hold on, gotta say something to Brittany, and I'm like standing there for 10 minutes. I'm like, Jake.
Well, then, yeah.
Stop. Like, call her. Let me in on the call. It really is
like, all right, I gotta like, this is just like now, like Ty life at 23. What does
this is what happens 3 hours into
this is what does suck, like just with like texting girls, just in general, is like, especially with, because like girls are going to be more like strangers generally, is like sometimes I feel like you have to like keep responding, otherwise like they think maybe not interested, but the thing is like opportunity cost. Sometimes I'm like, fuck the phone and fucking chuck it across the room, seriously, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with it.
We're on the dating apps.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The dating apps are the worst because like if you don't respond in like 6 hours a day, like those small increments mean more because they're like strangers kind of.
And not only that, Jake's like some other guy's grabbing her.
Oh well, yeah. Grabbing no, but sliding in the DMs, yeah.
Grab by the pussy, sliding. What's the difference?
The difference is I don't think that guy ends up grabbing her.
Now that we've had President Trump, it's okay to grab by the pussy. Is that wrong?
Well, when Kennedy is sneaking Marilyn Monroe through the tunnels.
Yes, everything a president does is now okay to do, is my point. Forevermore.
I always find it funny that Billy Bush got fired.
That poor bastard.
Presidential. Like, can you imagine? You got caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, that nerd like never even did anything wrong. Like a lot of people would get uncomfortable and laugh along if a billionaire was making crude
absolutely.
jokes.
Also, like,
you and I might be ballsy enough to be like,
you're a think about it. You're a host. Like, I don't know much.
I actually do agree with the locker room talk argument. I'm sorry. Like, if this recorder was on an hour before we hit it, there'd be some fucked up shit in this podcast, okay?
I can add
But we were in the locker room. We were in the locker room.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding, Trump's actions with women have at times been gross, and that's what matters, not
here's
the
the problem. This is the thing. Get the gender thing out. Throw that in the garbage. This is the real problem.
Because gender's fake. It's a spectrum. There's infinitely many.
It's privacy now. Never in the history of the world, modern technology, I can record you. Right. That's insane. Yeah. It would all have to be word of mouth. You'd have to hear it from someone else.
I'm recording you right now, incidentally.
Yeah, I know. This is it. This is the final thing.
You thought you were going to be a lawyer?
The locker.
You're going to get a dish.
They're going to come in. They're going to be like, "This you?"
Well, let's tie it back to Hamilton somehow. You never really said. How do you feel? Just do you like it? Or do you dislike it on the whole?
Maybe it's because like I'm like writing things about time and just history that like it's like bittersweet.
And you have a different idea of how you would be unifying.
Artistically, amazing.
Right?
Like the duel, like because I always knew about duels too. Just like, did he truly write like the raps, the beat, and all? That's all him.
I know that he is at least. I think he wrote it all, but he certainly started it on his own. For a while, it was good. Well, here's the thing. I think he wrote it all because it was going to be a concept album. He was just going to do it himself, but it was going to be a concept album about Alexander Hamilton. He was just going to put it out like he was a rapper. And then somehow, I know at one point Obama got wind of it, and he like hosted him at the White House, and he sang the opening song like to people at the White House. Eventually, it finds its way to Broadway. So I think he wrote it all. But.
It's beautiful. Art-wise, I think it encapsulates a lot of themes. The thing is that, and this is what I talk about, like with history, is like you're connecting two dots, the modern issues and the past issues, and they come together. And I guess my only gripe is that I really did see that it was racially divisive. I don't care what anyone says. This
that is a flaw.
And this is what let's talk about. It's really
hard to deny.
So there's two. They did it even worse because Star Wars. Love Star Wars. Right? All right, we need a more diverse cast. No problem, make them diverse. But the villains stay white. But the villains stay white. You will watch Rogue One. It's all angry white men in the room. It's like, come on. Now that started changing.
Are you being oversensitive with that example? Because that didn't occur to me.
I'm not being oversensitive because then, like when I'm watching, it's like, it just. If you make a group diverse, just think about it. Then the whole thing needs to be diverse.
Well, look,
but honestly, no, I'm not being oversensitive because some kids watch. No, seriously, some kids watching this now and like, it looks a little strange when it's only old white men as the villains. I'm
not so sure. So here's the thing: the crux is that the postmodernists are actually wrong about a lot, and so some of what they're doing is working, and some of it isn't because of that. Like, I think that, frankly, that stuff doesn't register that much to kids. So I think that there are woke people who would like the idea that they're trying to make an association between certain identities and goodness and certain identities and badness. I just don't think that's how kids' brains work. Like, I think kids are way smarter than people give them credit for, and I think people are way less simplistic and weird.
Well, regardless, scratch kids. How about me? Like, I'm coming to Rogue One. Like,
and you know what they're trying to do is say, fuck you.
Well, just watch Hamilton. It's like
Hamilton, I agree. Rogue One, I'm skeptical. Hamilton, I agree. I will say this, though. When they do Rogue One, because people can complain about it. I don't care that Rey's a girl and all that stuff. But when they do Rogue One and you go, okay, now even the spin-off is a female lead, like, it's starting to feel like it's required somewhere in the contract. Up at Lucasfilm.
Yeah, what was like the one that I found?
And I liked Rogue One.
There was a female lead recently that they said, I was like, what are they doing? Oh, James Bond. I think they're making a black woman now.
Okay. They're doing this at least a little tastefully in the sense that...
Well, is it James Bond? They're going to make her a different agent.
So the way they're doing it is... This is Daniel Craig's last one. I'm getting way into the weeds. Daniel Craig's last Bond film. Basically, I didn't watch the last one. Spoilers. He sort of retires. He gets his out. He's with a woman, whatever. It turns out to be a trap. Yada, yada. This is all from the trailer. But basically, he's out. So the new 007 they needed because he retired happens to be a black woman. We can argue about whether or not that's... But in this movie, the main character is 007 coming out of retirement. So she's actually somewhat of a villain in the sense that she's a competitor of his now.
This is what I have to say. Enough with the regurgitation of old stuff. This is actually not even a woke argument against... Just Hollywood. Enough. Go get material. New material. What the fuck?
I do want to see this James Bond. But no, I don't disagree that it's like, if you, I don't know, you're like the 20th person in line to say, we're going to find some way to say, what if this was a black female? And it's just kind of boring. Before you get to the woke stuff, it's like, this is, I don't know, like.
I guess, I'm sorry. But, like, I'm just smart enough that, like, yeah, it could be a black woman. You didn't.
Yeah, I know that.
You didn't fucking shock me.
You didn't change culture.
Yeah,
today.
It's like, no shit that she's a human being.
Yeah.
Like, this is an issue in feminine, like, when, like, it's called the Mary Sue.
Yes, yeah. Well, they did the shit. Oh my god, Princess Leia got Mary Sued into oblivion in the new movies.
Oh yeah, but no, it's more
Sorry,
specifically,
General Leia.
but it's more specifically Rey. She has no character development.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
never struggles
That's
at
true.
all with anything.
Barely.
And I bring this up because it's like, you know, you got to write good characters.
Yeah, but fucking Leia learned how to fly while she was dead in the middle of space.
When they saw that,
in the theater, I must have burst out
Force
laughing.
Awakens was so like, all right, it was very unclear. The second one started. I'll never forget. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I really am.
These are more blasphemous than the prequels by like an order of magnitude.
Yeah, and honestly, the prequels. Revenge of the Sith is great. It has its issues, but it's wonderful.
Is that 3?
Yeah, honestly,
I've always been a 3 apologist.
I prefer to watch the prequels than the original, but I grew up.
Wow, that's a fucking.
I find them more
statement.
like I watch
have a
Revenge
big
of the
horse in
Sith
this
scenes
fight.
nonstop. I also think
Revenge of the Sith is a good movie.
with The Force Awakens, like when I watched it, I thought it was like, okay, you didn't know where the series was going, like, but it could be good. My dad hates the prequels. He's like an original Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
I was from the '80s. He described it, the Force Awakens, as drinking a Coca-Cola after you threw up.
Yeah.
That's what he described it as. Of course, they were gonna fuck it up even more. I remember going into the Last Jedi is the worst. People say Rise of Skywalker is the worst, and The Last Jedi is the worst. I don't care what anyone says. But I remember going in the theater.
3's worse than 2, man.
No.
I mean, I don't know why I'm using those numbers. 7, 8, 9. I think 9's worse than 8.
No, I know.
They're both fucking
There
awful.
was no way you're coming back for me. 9 was gonna be awful no matter what.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that if you just keep drilling down on something,
like, this is what
8
Disney
committed
did,
more
right?
of a crime by being the thing that broke it, but 9 is worse the way 10 would be worse than 11. If you continue down a shit patch, it just becomes more shit. You're just kind of forgiving it because it.
9 just did whatever. But what I will say this, so in the theater, I'm in there, I'm excited because it's like a sky battle.
For 8.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that stupid pilot that it has no personality. Like
Dameron?
Yeah, just starts like acting like a child on the mic with the other guy. And I was like, "Are you guys serious? People are dying out in the space." Like,
so what is this?
The
People, it's like this. They always do this. The woke people. The fan theory of like, oh, him and the black guy. What's his name? Poe Dameron and Finn are gay. And you're like, will you stop? And then I think Disney tried to like wink at that, even though like, I guess he's bi. I mean, like the stormtroopers always going after Rey, but then they also, that was the other annoying thing. They're stuck again because there's a natural component to this. They're stuck helplessly doing classical quote unquote tropes. You and I might call them realistic traditions, but they can't help but make Finn sexually attracted to Rey. But then the feminism kicks in, and they're like, they just basically never let Rey be fully human because they're afraid to make her feminine. And so, like, she can't. Doesn't she never really even have like an affair?
I agree. So one of the main problems with Mary Sue is like you're like overpowered in every way. So you're never damsel in distress,
or even
you're never
just
distressed.
Right.
Like, it's just so stupid. No, that's an interesting way. I actually think you're right. Yeah, like she's never feminine at all. Like the thing is too is like I'm not even just a heterosexual guy. Like if I was in that universe, you would think that you'd be lusting after the Jedi female who's like the main, like she's fucking bland. It's like eating tofu.
I think she's a sexy little English biscuit.
Well, I'm not gonna get into that. Nah, I don't.
But let's say this though.
She's not my type. What?
Episode not well. She's not the most.
Don't say it. Move on. What are you gonna say?
She's not the most endowed in a certain upper torso region.
Jesus Christ.
I will say.
There goes the JD.
And yet. But, look. Episode 9, Babu Frick. Can you give me Babu Frick, though? Because I love Babu Frick.
Who the fuck is that?
It's the little mechanic guy. He's like, "Ow!"
In 10? Or
10.
Or,
The last
no,
one.
it's 9. Bro, are you serious?
I love Babu Frick.
He's not even a character in my mind. That scene didn't happen with C-3PO. Goodbye, friend. That whole movie.
He shows up in the spaceship later randomly.
Oh
Remember
my
that?
god. No, I don't. I try to forget that movie. Me and the Bill went to go see that movie solely so like if anyone ever talks shit about it, like I could explain exactly why it sucked.
I gotta get Nabil on here sometime.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd be scared to bring it. I'd have to tell him, this is being recorded.
I know. Let me at him. I need to get the true Nabil out.
Yeah, good luck.
Oh, it'll be fun. Maybe he'll cook for me. Maybe I'll cook for him. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll cook for each other. He'll have to eat like fucking Kraft mac and cheese, and I'll eat like some kind of.
I don't think he'll eat with you.
I'll eat in some kind of like Instagrammable fucking sirloin. I don't know. Well, I'm glad that you liked Hamilton though, in terms of like
I knew I was
the
going to like
quality
it
of it.
because
Okay.
like at the end of the day, like it's like the small details, but like at the end of the day, like it's a work
Great
of art.
songs.
It's great.
Yeah.
I don't know why it picked up so big. I'm shocked. Part of me
And
wants
isn't
to.
that somewhat? Here's the thing. So that seems like it'd be good, and you and I would celebrate this and go, "Oh my gosh, people are interested in these founding ideals." And yet, all the fandom and everything, no one has ever mentioned anything that sounds anything like a founding libertarian ideal. They're just like, "Oh, black rap on Broadway," and you're like, "Did you miss the entire content of this?"
Well, the way I thought about it, and this might be wrong, but it's just what I've seen is like, so the black hip hop will attract that crowd,
which
and
is
then,
very good listen to
right,
this on
right,
Spotify
but
all the
that's
time.
how they advertise. It's like an all black cast,
yeah.
whatever, and that gets that crowd. But the fact that they're using the founding
Progressives.
father history, think about it. Like I would watch it without knowing. It's like Hamilton. Oh, I
Right.
love the founding fathers. Mike Pence went.
Yeah, and
And
I
I
enjoyed
think
it.
I think it got more than just the white liberal population. I think it got like just all.
It's clearly just a popular all-around thing.
Like I think.
But
it
my
united
point is
the
that
country.
it does not seem to have done what you would hope, which is attract young people, progressives, yada yada, through the diversity, through the genre and whatnot, and then get them to go, oh, now I'm interested in, like, maybe I'll read Rob Chernow's book. Now I could be totally wrong. I bet sales are up on that. But like, I don't know. I guess my point is, if we asked, like, if we went in polite society, if we went in the elite woke postmodern world, which is only feet away, if I walk outside where we live, or where I live anyway. I shouldn't say we or North Jersey.
North Jersey's just as bad.
If I walk out of here, that's where I am, and I talk about Hamilton, like, these people will not even remember anything from the play that has anything to do with teaching them history, or it contains a lot of history and philosophy.
It's underlying, and they go by it so fast, but yeah.
And so, I don't know, it's kind of a shame, but, like, I guess, like, well, for example, you're all woke and stuff, and oftentimes it overlaps with I'm a little more socialist. It's not always. These are two different kinds of extreme left, but they often overlap somewhat social. So I was there in Hamilton. Well, he's the, Rob Chernow mentions this himself in an interview. He's like, well, he's the Wall Street guy. Aren't you guys the Occupy Wall Street people? But now he doesn't make this point, but I'm like, the fans of Hamilton often seem like they hate the thing Hamilton built in some ways.
What do I always say about liberals, woke people, and stuff? They're inconsistent, paradoxical. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's certainly the postmodern.
What have you done for me lately? What's convenient? What argument is convenient for me? That's the thing that just...
That seems to me to be a
blows
fair
my mind.
statement about progressives. When you use liberal, the American term liberal means progressive.
Yeah,
That's why I differentiate with classical
me and
liberal.
You are classical liberals.
Right.
Even
right.
I buy into the liberal tradition.
Right. If you say liberal in another country, they mean classical liberal. You say it here, you mean progressive.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but we are here.
Yes. No, I'm just trying to clarify in the sense that I actually, because this is also controversial once you disambiguate, people will say, oh, you're not being fair to progressives. And I'm like, I'm not. Like, because progressive and woke are quick becoming synonymous. And
yeah, what would be the difference between those two?
I can't tell you. I think in the past it would have been that there was such a thing as sensible
I
progressive.
thought woke was a meme.
What do you mean?
Because there's a meme where like this black guy's like sleeping and like his eyes open up. It's like woke, and I genuinely thought that was a meme. And then my professor, the honors classes that fucking school made me take, she goes in on how like
my honors classes were not super like that.
I'll never forget. Like I think she knew that like I was. This was the first time ever in my life that I couldn't hold in my adverse reaction. Like I actually was like sitting and like I actually was like going like this because she said on the PowerPoint, she's like, because white people will never understand what black people are going through. That's what she said verbatim. I'll never forget that because I just thought it was like the most
This brings me back
inconceivable
to
statement.
the fundamental tension I see, which is that's the thing they believe, and yet they love this play, and yet the way this play was conceived was a Hispanic man relating to a white founder, by relating him to black and Hispanic young men rapping. So it's like the thing itself falsifies that premise.
Well, it's just wrong inherently because, like, once again, let's go back. Like, the founding fathers were white. I'm theoretically white, but both you, a black man, an Asian man, an Indian man will understand just as much because we both have to read the material. That's the thing about writing down, too. It's like you're just basically reading the experiences of others through a lens, but nonetheless.
Yeah, and you can use analogy. You can use homology. You can use... There's all sorts of ways. We are... Yeah, it is absurd to say that we can't understand each other. Can we understand each other perfectly? No, nothing's perfect.
Like, this is how I get around that. Is that I don't think... Like, me and you are white. I don't think our experiences are that similar just because we're white. Like,
right, there's things that you and I... would only, but the point is that to a first approximation we can get it. You go like if Jake died tomorrow, you wouldn't be at if you truly couldn't understand something without experiencing it, you wouldn't be at a total loss, right? You wouldn't confuse that with me buying a coffee. You wouldn't confuse that with the experience of going on a slip and slide.
Yeah, but I could imagine like the death of my own brother and be like, oh, yeah.
Exactly. You'd immediately be 99% correct and then be able to
and
respond accordingly. Mm-hmm. And would that nonetheless mean that there's a lot in that last percent? Sure. No one, it is worse to have your brother die than to pretend it.
But then that's with everything in life.
Exactly.
And that's why it just becomes
and one of the big things, and actually Bill Nye said this, I think Bill Nye's a great... I think he has failed in many ways in recent times. Mm-hmm. He's ceded ground to the woke. He has hurt his...
I mean, let's be real. You're the scientist. This guy was teaching children. Isn't CBS? Who cares? People act like this is the new Einstein sometimes.
I'll defend him in the sense that he is, look, I am very libertarian with this stuff. For me, a scientist is someone following the scientific method. I believe he did that for the first chunk of his career when he was doing... First off, he was a mechanical engineer. But when he was doing the Bill Nye the Science Guy show, that's a legitimately scientific show, and he's legitimately a scientist. When he was doing his later stuff, climate change, real science behind climate change, but he became like a sort of obsessed with the Democratic policy around it, and then just Democrat Party generally, but then also the woke stuff, right? Like the thing with his Netflix show.
He did the gender thing, and that's what he lost.
That is complete pseudoscience.
Yeah, what's up with that?
That's a discussion for another time.
Yeah,
but
really
just to.
But yeah, like for him to, that's when he lost me. I was like, look, we could debate. There might be truth on both ends. Do not fucking pretend this is a hard science.
As usual, it always comes in clumps. It was also a disgusting, from an artistic perspective. You're like, okay, maybe it'll at least... So you'd think that it would be this like nightmare because it's as good as the rest of his career, but just saying false things. But it came along with so much else. He then has this woman come out and sing about her pussy. I think that was the word. I don't even think it was vagina. I can't remember though, so don't quote me on that. But she comes out and she's singing about her genitalia, and you're like...
How do you actually, going back, because we were talking about earlier about like sex and kind of got meandered, but like how do you feel about like WAP? Like just like people being like as derogatory as possible.
I'll say this, because there's a big controversy. Ben Shapiro is criticizing WAP, and my feeling is, on the one hand, look, when it comes to art and expression, I'm 100% socially liberal. My feeling is, I don't want any censorship. Make whatever you want. It doesn't mean that I have to pretend it's quality, but...
Well, yeah, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not saying it should be legal. I'm just saying, like, it's almost like it keeps doubling down every couple decades. Every generation, it seems like, how much dirty can we get? And quite literally, like, they used to make jokes. I remember I think it was my music teacher, 'cause she was talking about how like the songs are dirty. It's like at one point they're just going to be saying like just straight up curse words, and we're there.
Well, Tim Dillon had a joke where he said he claims to have predicted Lizzo, because apparently on some podcast or something before Lizzo blew up, he was like one day music's just going to be an ass shaking, and like that came true. But here's my thinking. So I would like to push back on the conservatives a bit in the sense that I think they took WAP a little seriously, in the sense that I know that they would probably did at the time, complain about Eminem, for example. But one of the big things about Eminem is, which he himself complains about, is like, oh, you're homophobic, oh, you're this, oh, you're violent, oh, you're sexist. And he's like, I'm obviously joking, and one of the ways you should know he's joking is that it's so exaggerated. He's talking about like ripping your balls off, shoving them in your ear, and pulling it out your nose.
I don't think Cardi B is like trying to make. Do you think it's satire?
It's not. Well, he's not doing satire either.
Abram's my gay friend, just for anyone listening. And he says that it's an empowerment of women.
That's nonsense. But here's the thing.
That's what he said, and I think that's the narrative. I don't think anyone's like, it's satire, it's a joke.
So I don't think it's satire. I don't think Eminem's satire either. I think it's.
What is this Eminem thing you're talking about? Just like a.
It's more shock jock, but it's.
Wait, what are you talking about? His old stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So he'll just sing about like extremely violent things.
You're lucky my millennial uncle showed me Eminem. That's how I could understand.
I don't really know Eminem myself.
Oh, okay. But I just okay.
But I know enough to know that he was singing about like
crazy shit.
If you were to take it literally, which you'd have to have like Down syndrome to do, I'm gonna get in trouble for that. You would think he would be the most sexist, violent, blah blah. But he's obviously kidding, and one of the ways you know is that he's really exaggerating what he's saying. Like if you actually thought he wanted to like. It's not just that he wants to kill you, he wants to rip your balls off and feed it to your mom. But let me finish this, though, because that's not satire, that's shock jockey humor, and that's kind of like trying to push free expression on purpose to like just get at you. I think there's an element of that to Cardi B. I don't think it's sexism, but I think people aren't realizing that she is doing that partially. Like, if you watch the WAP music video, there's jokes all throughout it. Like when it starts and like when they're saying, there's some holes in this house at the beginning of the song, Ben Shapiro's like, my word, right out the gate. And it's like, and yeah, everyone's overly teasing Ben Shapiro too. He's not that. His point is more about a degradation of culture thing. He has some decent points. He's not actually that prude that he's like blushing as he listens to this. So let's be clear about that too, because people are being unfair to him. But when she's saying that, like, you don't think that Cardi B thinks that's fucking hysterical. Like, she's sitting in a room like you and I would as bros going, wouldn't it be fucking hysterical if there's this little voice going,
well, I don't think she really I think she has producers there.
Whatever it is, it's a joke. Like for example, the music video starts, and so the whole thing is about how wet their pussies are. There's water pouring out of the front door of the estate. That's a joke. Like, that's funny. That's extreme. Like, it's not even sexy, that part. Now, where it's different from Eminem is that interspersed throughout is them actually naked, gyrating, and it's legitimately pornographic, and it's being consumed that way. No one is being honest if they don't think it's being consumed that way. Like Eminem is being consumed only as comedy, whereas there are people watching WAP so that they will get sexually aroused, because there's parts of it that are just absolutely not joking and just saying, here are my breasts.
But is this damaging?
I tend not to think so, to be frank with you.
Really?
I just think that it's kind of sophomoric. I think it's noise.
100 years from now, what's the music that was of this era? WAP?
I don't think so.
Hip hop's big right now. That's what's taking over.
If it's WAP, I think that it'll be. I don't think that it'll be thought of the way, Beethoven or even the Beatles are. I think it'll be like, wow, it was a shitty era. But I don't think that it'll be that people will be like depraved animals and be like, WAP was so good, and they're all like
it's not even music,
wearing mouth gags.
I don't know.
I think it's inconsequential. My feeling is that it's, to me, I roll my eyes. I go, it's funny, whatever. But for me, I don't think it's damaging. I think, like, from an opportunity cost standpoint, it's somewhat of a waste of everyone's time, but that's their prerogative. I don't think that it's. I personally, I don't know. I want to do all sorts of things. Like, I want to make stupid jokes. I also want to write serious philosophical.
I was thinking about this. So,
but
you have like WAP.
Yeah.
But you can't say like things like the R word.
Yeah.
Right, and you're being censored that way.
Right, and I think that's a really good point. Is that like, this is definitely a double standard in terms of, are you for free expression or not?
Yeah.
Because if you're for free expression, you don't have to like it when I say retard any more than I have to like the WAP video. But like, don't try to control what I'm doing. You can avoid me. You can not be friends with me. You can criticize me. That want for control, that authoritarian part of the woke thing,
How do they have so much power? Because they don't have like government standard. Well, Twitter.
They do in other places too, like in Canada. Like that's why Jordan Peterson is so big. In Canada, it's actually passed as law that you can't misgender someone with pronouns and whatnot. Like you'll be
How's
fine.
that even enforced?
Probably they report you and probably they believe them. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, but it shouldn't. But in principle, it shouldn't be on the books, even if it's never enforced. It's just insane.
That's
and it's a slippery slope towards just insane tyranny. But to the point about it being empowering to women, that is such an insane thing to say. And no offense to Abram, I think I'm friends with him on Instagram now. I haven't met him, but that's not even his. It's not like that's his idea. Like that's an idea that's out there that people are subscribing to or not. Did he give an argument for why? We're not gonna pick on him, but because he's not here. But what's the argument? Like, what's the rationale?
It's just so funny because it's just like that. Like they got him. Like I'm trying to remember because he literally just said like they have a wet ass pussy. Like they're wet. Like they're wanted.
So they're trying to say that where a male rapper might come out and say I'm big and tough.
I think it's the equivalent. Like this is just me.
Right.
I'm like now just pontificating like what it could be. It's almost like the equivalent of saying like I got a big dick.
Yeah.
Because that's the equivalent. Because without it's weird because it's like the tool of sex. Like how do I explain? Like instead of saying like I have a nice ass, like it's like I got a wet ass pussy. It's like quite.
I produce lube.
It really is.
Precipitously.
it really is like saying like I got a big dick. I mean they could say like I have like big boobs. Or,
I
like,
guess.
but
I guess there's a difference in the sense that I'm not sure it's empowering to men to sing about how big your dick is, but also.
Well, yeah, but
the word is so stupid.
But that's the thing though, is like women have really taken like big dick energy, and they've almost like I've never heard a guy say it, but girls do.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's scumbags out there right now. Hey, bro, this big dick energy. But I'm just saying, like...
I feel like I have big dick energy, but that's okay.
Big dick energy.
BDE, dude?
Yeah.
I was at a party at a college.
Maybe it's is it a millennial thing? Is that what you guys are doing?
I was at a party at a college with the millennials. I'm a millennial. And I say... They're talking about... Someone mentions big dick energy. Probably me. And
so it is. I misspoke, guys. It's a millennial thing. We got to the bottom of it.
Ty's a Zoomer over here.
Yeah.
So let's say this: Gen Z is the older half of the generation, and the Zoomers the younger half. How do you like that?
No, I'm still a Zoomer.
He's a Zoomer.
Like I got it. Look, like I'm leading these clowns, but I'm not.
Look, I'm not leading the millennials, but I should be. Anyway, so there's no way we're not in the same generation. But anyway, like I don't know how this. It's so arbitrary how these are cut up. But anyway, where the fuck even are we? Where's my train of thought? The empowerment thing. It's like I was at this party and I probably said big dick energy jokingly, or somebody did, and then like as a joke, right? And this is the thing: comedy is dying with this woke stuff. And I was like. I don't even know what I said, but I tried to jokingly make a female equivalent. And I don't know if I said like tight pussy energy or what it was. Or if someone said I have big dick energy and I was like, but they were a girl and I was like, well, no, you have tight pussy energy. You know what I mean? Like some joke.
That's what you would say to them?
Ty doesn't think I'm great with the ladies. So, all of this in the presence of my then girlfriend. But anyway, so... Then this one girl there, who was quite woke, and to be fair, I won't go there, but like, let's not go there for now. But anyway, pretty woke. Somebody, like, people didn't really get the joke. Like, wait, what? But like, they weren't upset, but they were just like, wait, what? And but this woke girl did get the joke. And she's straight face just goes, oh, he's just gendering the term. Like, don't worry about him. And I went, I didn't gender it. Nature did. Like, what are you talking about? Funny, like I gendered the term dick.
I got a great thing for you. I'm playing a card game. And like the rules are written on the fucking card. Mm-hmm. This Nabil laughs at this all the fucking time. This happened in Vermont. And like they're doing it, and like she's telling me to do something. Basically, the card says like if you fuck up, you lose a card, and she's acting as if you keep the card, you gain a card.
Oh,
so I'm
literal opposite.
Literal opposite.
Okay.
And I have to come in, And I have to go like, no, like Delilah, like you lose the card. It says right here, not being pretentious, like literally just like no, you lose the card. Yeah. And then another girl goes like, oh, he's mansplaining. and as a knee-jerk reaction, just like so quick, I'm like, no, Chantal, I'm just reading. And the girl literally, oh. But that's the thing, like, oh, mansplaining is the worst. Because, like, honestly,
it's an absurd term.
I get excited about topics. This is why I know, like, they say, like, the Romans, Jeffersonian as well. It's like you retire, become a farmer. I'm going to retire and be a professor. Because, like, I like teaching. But the thing is like, I come to the table, not pretentiously. It's like, there's a lot of things that, like, I've dived deep into that, like, most people haven't. Whether you're a man or a woman, like, I always start off, it's like, oh, do you know about this? Mm-hmm. If they say no, it's like, oh, and then, like, I'll go off.
Right, and what you mean is not to be pretentious, is to be, if I start explaining something and you already know it, that would be even more insulting than me to ask you.
Right, and that's why, like, I ask, because I'm like, oh, are you familiar with X? And it's like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, what do you, and then, like,
Right, because sometimes you'll be like, well, evolutionary, this and that, and then the person's like, I'm a bio major. Yeah. So you want to just, make sure.
No, absolutely.
Speaking out of turn.
But...
Well, so look, man, what I love about you is that you've got this way of, and I think part of it is that I've just been looking at the postmodern thing too long, which gives me a particular understanding of it, and I'm writing this book about everything like that, but you get into the weeds, whereas I like that you are still at a stage where you can cut through the bullshit and just make the most obvious, simple, elegant argument, which is like, I'd been arguing against, so like one thing that'll happen is you'll be talking about something like this happened to that Salam Day at Katie's, where you guys are arguing about whether or not there was a genocide of Native Americans by British colonialists / Americans, New Americans. One of you takes the position pro and one takes con, right? And then quite aside from that debate, somebody pipes up, themselves white, and says, and they were just trying to get the debate to end, but they used the tools of the modern era to do it. And they said, well, at the end of the day, I don't even feel like we're not going to get to the bottom of this because we're just a bunch of white people talking about Native Americans. Like, we shouldn't even be having this conversation. Like, we should leave this to presumably Native Americans to argue out and figure out. And again, as though there's no objective facts that you could understand and deduce. And this is obviously insane, and I've made all sorts of arguments against it, and I'm going to publish them. But you just go, I'll just never forget, because it's so true, and I just never really thought of it in this terms. You were like, that's an ad hominem attack. And I'm like, it is, because she basically said you're white. You're wrong, you're white. And it's like, it is ad hominem. Like, you've just brought up a non sequitur, my race, and said, therefore, not even you're wrong, you're not even allowed to have this conversation. And I love that, because it's like, we need to get back to these classical ideas of fallacies that you're not allowed to commit.
Yeah, and that I think that's the biggest one they do. Mansplaining this, that.
It's all economics.
And I always see it as a violation of the logos. It's like, no, there is objective truth.
Yes. That I can understand.
You're right. I remember that.
And what I said to this person, I'm not going to put this person on blast because I don't think they're particularly woke or anything. But what I said at the time was like, you realize that, like, by the way, this is called standpoint epistemology or positionality. The idea that, like, your identity gives you knowledge over things rather than your logos.
Yeah.
And I what I said in the moment, and again, like, a little more cumbersome of an argument than just being like, ad hominem, next, was, okay, you're a woman. Do you know that much from a scientific and medical perspective about ovaries? And if we looked up who the world expert was, and it happens to be a man, would you be particularly surprised? And would you actually think you know more than him about female reproduction? Obviously not, because he used the logos, he studied, he did serious, dispassionate, objective scientific work, and all you did was get cramps once a month. Now that's going to get me in trouble. No, but seriously, you have an understanding of that experience of a certain kind, but even that we brought to understand. You and I have had cramps.
It just goes against empathy. And just like if a girl tells me like you have cramps, like I get cramps every month, and I take it seriously, it's like, oh wow, okay. And then it's like, you will never understand. It's like, no, I got the gist. Yeah, I won't experience it.
Right.
I got the
and the cramp I'm using by analogy is not the same kind of cramp, but it's like
Yeah.
the word wouldn't be the same if there wasn't some truth to the analogy.
Honestly,
Right.
and then it's just lonely. Then the world's just like, the whole point of human beings and language is like, I can communicate to you.
Yeah.
Like things. And you could get like a general sense.
Yeah. Well, this is
Or
one
workable
thing.
sense.
I just love common sense, and it's gone. And that's one thing about Justice Scalia is that, like, it's kind of ironic, but he could. This is kind of ironic, but he could actually explain common sense, if that makes sense. You're not supposed to have to, because it's common sense, and once you're explaining, you're actually doing more of a building an argument. But you have to at this point. And he would say things like, he would always say things like, words have meanings, right? But because it's like, look, at some point, like the idea that and the thing he's complaining about is people who are like, well, how could we possibly know what people meant? Their writings are so old that the words could have all meant different things. But it's like, it's like, get out of here, man. Like, is there changes over time that we have to take into account? But yeah, but again, 99, like it all goes back to this concept of first approximations, which is one of the best concepts from science, which is that if let's say that like any given phenomenon has like 90 causes. But one of those 90 causes is responsible for 90% of the effect. To a first approximation, it has one cause. If you need more precision, add in more of those 99, but you're getting diminishing returns because each one's only adding a marginal predictive value. Everyone likes to pretend, and this goes back to why I brought up Bill Nye, is that he said something great one time, which is that people like to conflate, 1% uncertainty with 100% uncertainty. Well, no. If I know something and I have a mathematical answer to 99% certainty, there's an error bar, but it's a well-defined error bar, and you can't pretend that the whole thing is just random. It's like, no, we know to this precision.
So this is controversial. Do you think that's why stereotypes can be useful at times?
Yeah, because of course they're not deterministic. They're not but no one uses them that way either. Now, of course, there's periods of time where they were used that way, and they may have been totally inaccurate. So I'm not saying this never happened, but I think Lee Jossam in psychology is known for studying stereotypes, and my understanding is that what he found is they tend to be accurate. Now, these are studies that were done in very contemporary times, but that they tend to be accurate. They tend to adjust to time, like up to date. So if Italians acted one way 100 years ago, and that was the stereotype, today the stereotype would be whatever they're doing now. And that people tend to sub in for the stereotype specific knowledge they have of an individual once available. So I might say to somebody, Ty's Italian, and they suddenly have all sorts of prejudices about you. They would tend to be accurate on average, and then when they met you, they would tend to go out the window if they were met with your individual. Anything about you that contradicted it, they wouldn't suddenly be like, I don't believe him when he says. We all know people like that. There are prejudiced people, but that's what he found, is that people generally like that we've sort of catastrophized and overgeneralized the idea that stereotypes are always wrong and misused and whatnot. And actually, it's the minority of cases where they are, as damaging as that can still be. That's my understanding anyway. I haven't read this literature, this research. I've read sort of like some popularization from Steven Pinker. I follow Lee Jossam on Twitter. So I've seen some stuff there, but yeah. That was a lot of stuff. You want to watch Hamilton again?
3 hours, man.
Yeah, it's very long. Well, it's 4 a.m. So I don't know if you want to call this. I don't know if you have anything else you want to talk about. I did want to tie one thing up. Like fucking an hour ago, I was talking about. I don't even know what we were talking about, but I was talking about my middle school. I was talking about how you thought you took for granted that people would be interested in history, and I was not that kid. But I was reading in a middle school history class, and it always kind of bothered me. And this is like to this day still a very low resolution thing people will say is, oh, like these historical figures like Jefferson are hypocrites because they spoke out against slavery and had slaves. It's like, okay, but that's like that's a little easy. At the time, that bothered me. Like, what is up with this hypocrisy and whatnot? I think. And anyway, I'm reading, and I forget who it was, but they were talking about, but it was the person themselves talking about the contradiction in their own time. You go, wow, this isn't just some ignoramus. Like, he knew himself at the time that his beliefs and his actions were in contradiction. Well, that's a little different than like I'm some genius now looking back going, look at this moron. Like he knew it, and then he used this term I'll never forget. He said he experienced trials of conscience, and when I read that, that's the first time and probably the only time for many years later that something from history like just reached out and grabbed me. And I was like, whoa, like holy shit, that term trials of conscience. And it was just like that's the first time a historical figure felt human to me. I felt like I felt like someone successfully communicated to me. Again, talk about can you understand other people through that much time.
I think we lost the human element. I think when we look at history, like they get angry. Here's the thing I thought about the left. They don't love their fellow white citizens. Think about that. Really dive deep. I love every citizen of this country, even if they're lost. A lot of them are lost. But to me, I'm like, Marshall says the phrase, it's like we will sink or swim together. You know? And when I say like they don't love, like there's a hatred. And that also applies to historical figures. Like I look at Thomas Jefferson, it's like you're a human being. Benjamin Franklin, who I love, he sold slaves in the beginning of his life to make money. And as far as the hypocrisy, that's like a communist who lives in Brooklyn, who buys a hot dog for $2. It's a little different, but nonetheless.
I'm still going to criticize the champagne communists.
Yeah, but yeah, they will. It's just modern. Like I think I get angry because they just don't understand the Industrial Revolution, and it really shows, and it really pisses me the fuck off. It's like you are on your fucking phone tweeting, right, in your air-conditioned house, and you get in your car. It's like you're living in such a modern world with your computer and shit, and then you get mad that in the 1700s, when horseback was the fastest way to communicate, that they had slaves, and. No, don't get me wrong. I'm mad. Like, if I was at the Founding Fathers, like, I would even say, like, yeah, you could have slavery, but why race? Why do they have to, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the biggest sin there.
I had a similar argument when I was arguing with some postmodern professors once, a few years ago, and they were being anti-science, as postmodernists tend to be, and I said to them, like, isn't it kind of an absurdity that, like, you're posting to Facebook on an iPhone about postmodernism, like, a phone that, like, could only be built if you knew quantum mechanics? Like, how are you going to deny science through that? Like, go write it on a fucking piece of paper.
Yeah,
okay?
no,
like,
it's so true.
Hand it to me that way. Say it to me. Like, don't insult me like this. Don't put this through.
Peterson says it. You live on the corpse of your ancestors. I think I had a revelation.
Jesus Christ.
That was really scary. And I forget if I told you or not. I think I did. It's just like, I don't know why, but like I always just like thought and just believed that like the American government is still somehow connected to the 1776. As if like somehow there's a string that's all connected. And it's really not. Yes, there's precedent, but like the last generation is just the boomers. And that's post-World War II, like I told you. So that's why like I get nervous, because it's like you lose that, and we lose our stability, and I think that we're going to deal with problems.
Our institutions are supposed to fill in some of that gap.
But those are on the way out.
Right. They do, but now how strong are they? So far though, our 1776 institutions and later, but that were put in the service of 1776, those institutions so far have not been too perverted as compared to institutions like the university, which will now, instead of listing their purpose as like the discovery and dissemination of objective truth, and now it's diversity, equity, inclusion, and the arts and all of these different institutions that have been perverted to the woke thing. Yes, they're trying to infiltrate law and somewhat succeeding. Yes, yada, yada, yada. But the constitutional system, generally speaking, with the checks and balances and everything, has worked against Trump. It is carrying the 1776 in its structure.
Yeah.
But yes, how long can that?
Well,
how much can that bear?
Yeah, I don't think it can bear.
And is that enough? If just that's there, but the spirit of the entire populace is antithetical to it, even if it lasts, does that even matter? Because this is what people don't get, because they always, and you said this earlier, it's like they're always like, well, it's not infringing the law of the Bill of Rights, whatever. And you're like, but the spirit, Ben Shapiro says the culture of laws, the culture of rights. It's like you should be, if you're a social media company, you should be respecting the First Amendment. I'm not saying
Yeah,
you legally
no.
have to. I'm saying you should be because we have a
I think
culture.
because I've been arguing because all my law friends are all fucking banging their chests like, it's legal! Yes, it is, but it shouldn't. And we go back and forth. But the thing is that the layman who doesn't know law sometimes knows more than the lawyer. And this is what I mean by that.
Yes.
Like every American knows the First Amendment, and they go like, Trump got banned? That's a violation. And the lawyer goes like, actually, it's not. It's like, well, then something was miscommunicated.
This is important because this is one of the worst things about elitism and credentialism is that very often the useful idiot is the more educated person. In the sense that, like, first off, what that person's doing has nothing to do with their position on the topic. That is that person being elitist and just trying to say, I'm more educated than you.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's actually legal. I know enough. I know more. Look at this. It's signaling. It's virtue signaling. It's signaling for mates. It's look at me. I'm smart. I'm educated. I'm so smart that I know that this thing that seems wrong is actually right. No, it's not. So it's literally true, and then like very confused without any caveat after it of what Brett Weinstein calls the spirit of the right, and that's an important thing because I think about that all the time. And that's, again, instead of working knowledge, that's a trivial knowledge thing. That's, oh, look at my trivia. Actually, they're totally within, what they're saying is, you idiot layman, I know that would never stand up in a court of law. Like, that's not really the point. Like, the point is that you only have a open society if both the legal and the society respects the right.
Yeah. And, if I'm going for politics, that will be... Yeah, and...
This is true in science. This is true in a lot of fields. I know. I'm glad that you said that because I've never heard anyone else articulate it. I see this kind of thing all the time.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And...
goes back to common sense.
Yeah.
A common sense understanding of free speech is in that sense better than the...
I'm really upset. Like, I don't believe in hate speech. And I go back and forth. There's no words that can hurt you.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Well, I think the first time I think this is a slippery slope from hate crime, which I've never agreed with either, and which is more controversial. But, like, that stuff's all already illegal and not lightly punished. Like, if I murder you, why does it matter why I did it in the terms of... It matters why in the sense that law cares about intent in the sense that, like, if it's not on purpose, then maybe it's manslaughter. If it's, is it a crime of passion? Okay, those kinds of things. But once it's on purpose... if I just didn't like the way you looked at me versus your skin color should not matter. I murdered you. That's
you're talking like a hate crime,
right? Like suddenly because if they had reason to think I killed you because you were Italian, specifically, it's a worse crime or a different crime. Why?
Yeah, I think that is just because of the hit. Like you have a murder, usually those things because that could lead to genocide, and I think the Nazis is what they're scared of. But what I will say specifically about hate speech,
except if you punished the murder, the same result would happen.
I guess, but no, you got to damage the philosophy on that.
I don't think law should.
You go murder some random guy on the street versus you go murder some Italian on the street. Like you're even worse.
I agree morally. I just don't agree legally.
Well, why? Because is another
laws
thing
are
too.
Supposed to prescribe.
No, laws should prescribe morals to some degree. I believe in natural law. I think they should be in
accordance with morals, although not all morals should be encoded.
Yeah, but that should be one that I think should be in there.
I disagree.
That's premeditated.
It's illegal.
So first of all,
illegal. Sorry.
But like one of the things about murder is it premeditated?
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's just like if you can prove that like you're some Nazi who's going out to kill, then yeah, it's actually once again I still think it's like worse.
What if I why shouldn't there be a hate version of every crime then? Because if I steal from you,
I'm gonna be honest. I studied criminal law. I don't remember ever we going over hate crimes. So this is a field that I wasn't taught in law school.
Like if I steal from you right now, that's I don't know if it's robbery, whatever the crime's called.
Right.
If they can find in my journal or I said it beforehand that it's provable that I did it because you're Italian, why is that different? It's already illegal. Punish me.
The only difference would be it's premeditated, like I said. But like if let's say,
what if it's premeditated either way? Like it's premeditated, because I don't like his shirt that says Higgies. Fucked him.
Yeah.
Okay, that's premeditated, but it's not a hate crime.
Like I said, like I've never seen the hate. Like they'll use it in the news like hate crime. But I've never knew that there was like an element that like makes it worse.
They managed to get it into law somehow. Now here's what bothers me about it.
I think that's good though. But here's the thing. Here's the better thing. Does that apply the opposite way? Because I guarantee you that there's like a lot of like
Technically.
like there may be a black American that like goes after like a white American.
Yeah, technically. Did you hear something weird?
I did, yeah. It's gone now. Dude, that sounded like a zombie or something.
Right?
It's like weird. Imagine the apocalypse starts now.
Yeah, just now on this podcast.
Yeah.
Is it a mouse? No.
But
That's horrifying. In any event, hopefully it's on the recording. Vindicate us.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening and you heard that.
Where the fuck?
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know, but my feeling is, and this is a debate for another time, we should wrap this up at some point. My feeling is that, and I could be wrong, that hate speech is a slippery slope from hate crime. Now, you could say that hate crime is valid and hate speech isn't, which is your position, but my feeling is that they let hate crime in, and now they basically what that did was it made racism illegal. I don't think racism should be illegal. I think it's wrong, but if you want to believe what you want to believe, that's up to you.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong stance on the hate crime. I really have to. I didn't know that was a thing. I'd have to really dive.
My understanding is it isn't. I could be
But
wrong.
as far as
But here's the thing.
speech.
Hate speech then says now you've made the norm of the hate crime, at least in people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
You've made this norm, and now I feel like that's what helps them now prescribe speech, when before anyone with a common sense said you can't, it's freedom of speech. But now they go, well, we've got competing values. We have the First Amendment, we also have hate crime. So can't there be speech crime if it's a hate crime? I feel like that's related. I could be wrong, but I feel like that's part of the lineage.
That could be. My main thing is like you already have what I consider the real hate speech illegal: defamation and slander. Right.
Okay.
By the way, if you're a political figure, then you can't use those to help you.
And even privately, it's like one of the highest and hardest standards to meet with law, right? Like
It
you have
is,
to show
yeah.
material
But
damage.
it should be like that.
Yes,
like,
because you don't want any chill on free speech.
Yeah, and
As little as possible.
There is. And I always say words can't hurt you. Like come on, we need mentally stronger people.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
But
Is that your closing message? You're weak.
You're weak, need to be strong. No, my closing I didn't think about that. Closing message. This is how I feel about the state of this country, or at least my life in this time period, is I feel like it's been boiled down that there's all these like pieces.
Mm.
It's like weird. It's like kind of broken, kind of not. Right? Like we're still somewhat of a superpower, but like we're broken in certain areas. That I think the optimistic in me wants to say that, yeah, it's pretty bad, the woke movement, whatever, but something could be built out of this. You know, our architecture sucks, we could improve it. I don't know.
This is an opportunity.
I think, yeah, like kind of, you look at 1776, right? Just to make an analogy back to Hamilton, that was a specific time with a specific opportunity.
And the only reason when you and I say the number 1776, we get all of these visions of like the small L libertarian American ideals and like, if you were there at the time, you'd go, this is dismal.
Yeah.
Conditions. But they took the opportunity.
Right, and I think that there's an opportunity here because that message isn't going to work. And I think we have the tools here to really develop a diverse republic. And I think that religion's out, but I think something can take its place. That's just my hope.
Ty Catello is going to make 2021 evoke something like 1776.
Not 2021.
In 300 years.
But hopefully by the time I die.
2076.
But yeah, yeah, I guess those would be. What's your closing remarks?
I have to have. I'm the host. I don't have to have closing remarks.
Yeah, no, you just.
Yes. Yes.
You can find us on.
No, thanks for doing this. I've been wanting for years actually to have you be the first guest. We actually did talk about this at the salon night at Katie's.
Is that where it goes that far back?
I mentioned wanting to do a podcast, and you were like, "Yeah."
Well, thanks for having me as the first guest. I feel honored.
Yeah, this is great. I'll have to have you come on again, and maybe you'll be my only guest ever because no one will want to do this. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna start asking random people. I gotta get some SJWs on here.
Oh,
We're in no short supply. I can get them on here.
I'll be done with trial work, so I'll be able to cross-examine. It'll be like a deposition. So what you're saying, you have to like type it up as like
we've got a stenographer here.
But you just said flip back.
Everything contradicts. Yeah, I feel like someone won't do it in that sense that like once you start grilling them, like they don't want that on recording. But I'll be nice, you know. Yeah, I gotta get Nabil. I gotta get Jake. Obviously, my older brother Mike wants to do it. I should do Katie. You know, we got JC. We got all sorts of people on all sorts of topics.
Podcasts, do they ever do groups?
What do you mean?
More than 2?
Oh yeah, I'm open to it.
How does that flow with like Joe Rogan? Have you watched that?
Yeah, I've seen podcasts like that. You got to be a better podcaster, and you got to be a disciplined group of people because they call it crosstalk. But when more than one person's talking at once, it's like impossible for the listener to hate it. So that's something to be avoided. Everyone has to go in going like, people have to be like in a radio mode, thinking like, look, you got to be careful when you open your mouth because sometimes in a group environment, 2 people will be having separate conversations, but you can't have that.
I never thought of that.
It happens, you don't even realize it. That you guys are kind of splitting and recombining. But like if we were here with Jake and Brittany and we were all having one conversation, at some point you and I might go off on a tangent and they might go off and then we come back.
So 3 might be like the perfect number then.
3's not bad. And look, you can do it up to like, I've had it like 5 where it works, but these are like pros in the sense that they do it a lot and they've kind of disciplined themselves.
How do they know when to speak?
That's the thing. I guess they just kind of, by doing it a lot, figured it out. But I've done them with a lot. This is not my first rodeo. I podcasted in high school. A video game podcast. I literally had forgotten about this. And I would have, I'm just a kid. I would just like fucking throw it at the wall. I have all sorts of friends, undisciplined fucking 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds on. And there was a lot of cross-talk. There was so much profanity and like racism and like anti-Semitism. And like they weren't actual racists and anti-Semitists, but they're teenage boys. And I would be like, guys, I have to fucking like edit this like crazy now to like save your ass, and I'll put it in. I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna like that in 20 years. I was like smart enough to know that, that was before it was woke. I saved her more than anyone knew. But yeah, so I'm open to that, and any topic goes. It's very much free form. I just always wanted to do this, and and I'm looking forward to the Court of Letters. I like that we're both multiple avenues trying to get ourselves out there. Put stuff out there.
Yeah, throw and see what sticks. But I also would like if everything can like mix to like intersect.
Yeah, man. I mean, I like some synergy.
Do you like writing like stories and stuff?
Yeah, I've been wanting to do it more. I've read a couple.
Because you really should think about the premise of the episode. I'll talk to you more about it because I have to start brainstorming that episode too. Would you want it to be like here, the setting?
For what?
Would Katie's place? Like, how nice is Katie's place?
Are you talking about for which? For the Court of Letters or for something else?
For your episode.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Would you ask about Kate's? How far?
For some reason, I don't know why. I feel like her house, because you mentioned it in Pennsylvania, has like the observatory of the stars. Or if I just completely fabricated that.
No, she does have some cool windows that are a little interesting, but not like a cupola. But if you go out front, like because it's in the mountain, it's a very starry sky for around here. It's not the Nevada desert, but you can see more. Let's sign this off. We can keep talking. We're gonna go to bed soon.
Yeah.
How fucking long? This is a 4-hour podcast. That's among the longest in existence out there. Like if Joe Rogan will do a 4-hour sometimes, but we're probably not worth it. Let's see.
We could splice it up into episodes.
You're worth it. I don't know if I am.
Get the hell out of here.